In the shadows of our mapped world, there exist places no ordinary eye has seen, territories hidden by design, danger, or the sheer weight of isolation. From icy expanses where satellite images dissolve into blank voids, to islands protected by tribes untouched by outsiders, the Earth conceals corners humans are forbidden to tread. There are cities constructed for nuclear production, deliberately omitted from public knowledge, vaults carved into mountains, safeguarding the seeds of life far from prying eyes, and military installations so carefully obscured that even modern technology struggles to capture them. As we trace the faint outlines of lands erased or blurred, uncover the whispered stories behind hidden sites, and confront the enduring mysteries that make them untouchable, the world reveals itself in fragments no map dares to show. These are spaces where secrecy reigns, and the boundary between the known and the unknowable stretches beyond any explorer's reach. The secret Arctic blank, a dark patch in Antarctica. In the farthest reaches of the planet, where the wind moves like a living current and the light itself feels foreign, lies a portion of Antarctica that seems to defy the gaze of satellites. On public maps, the continent unfolds in dazzling detail, endless ridges of white, serrated coastlines, fractured glaciers. And yet there is one stretch, near the Queen Maud Land sector, where the images blur into an unnatural void. This blank space is not the soft distortion of a snowstorm or the natural confusion of cloud cover. It is a deliberate absence, a section where the world's most precise instruments suddenly refuse to see. Researchers first noticed the anomaly in the mid-2000s, when the earliest high-resolution composite maps of the continent became available online. While nearly every mountain and ice shelf was accounted for, a polygonal swath between the Volhat Mountains and the eastern expanse of the Princess Astrid Coast appeared as an untextured patch of grey. Attempts to zoom in only revealed a digital fog. The coordinates existed, yet the landscape was erased. For a continent already off-limits to all but scientists and sanctioned explorers, this peculiar concealment hinted at something even more controlled, a place intentionally hidden within the last true wilderness on Earth. Antarctica's history of secrecy is older than most realise. The 1959 Antarctic Treaty declared it a continent devoted to peace and science, banning military activity and nuclear testing. But the same treaty placed strict limits on who may enter and under what circumstances. The majority of its 14 million square kilometres remain unvisited, protected under layers of bureaucracy and ice. Nations with research stations, among them the United States, Russia, China and Norway, maintain enclaves of presence scattered across the void, each operating under an uneasy transparency. While official reports emphasise cooperation, the logistical reality is isolation. Distances are so vast and conditions so lethal that entire valleys can exist unseen for decades, and what is discovered there is often kept quietly classified. Satellite mapping was supposed to pierce that veil. NASA's Landsat and ESA's Sentinel missions delivered crisp imagery of glaciers moving at the rate of centimetres per day, of crevasses deep enough to swallow cathedrals. Yet in certain places, this one in particular, the data abruptly stops. In some archives, the gap is explained away as no usable imagery, while in others, the section simply does not appear in the dataset at all. Analysts have noticed that the outline of the blank zone matches no known cloud formation patterns, suggesting the data was either omitted or replaced. Conspiracy sites quickly seized on the mystery, speculating about hidden bases, buried ruins, or even entrances to subterranean realms. Most scientists dismissed those claims, yet none offered a definitive reason why the world's most photographed continent would harbour such a persistent blind spot. Geographically, the coordinates of the dark patch intersect with the so-called Schirmacher Oasis, one of the few ice-free regions in East Antarctica. The area is known to contain dozens of freshwater lakes, a rare phenomenon in a land otherwise frozen solid. German expeditions during the 1938 and 1939 Deutsche Antarktische Expedition photographed this region extensively from the air, marking it with the cryptic label Neuschwabenland. Some of those aerial photographs later vanished from archives during the war, replaced by incomplete copies and sketches. Post-war researchers noted inconsistencies between those early maps and modern surveys, suggesting that either the coordinates were deliberately shifted or the original material was quietly withheld. The Soviets built the Novolazarevskaya station nearby in 1961, later joined by Norway's Troll station several hundred kilometres to the west. Both remain among the most remote outposts on the planet, connected to the outside world only by supply flights from Cape Town and occasional satellite links. Visitors report a horizon so featureless that landmarks vanish within seconds, and yet beneath that stillness seismographs have recorded faint tremors that do not correspond to tectonic movement. Some researchers attribute them to the cracking of subglacial lakes. Others, less formally, speak of machinery. What lends the mystery weight is not the rumour but the pattern. Multiple mapping platforms, Google Earth, Bing Maps, Yandex, and even open-source archives used by glaciologists, display the same distortion over identical coordinates. In some frames, the blur is polygonal as if digitally inserted. In others, the region is replaced by the texture of surrounding ice, copied and pasted to fill a hole. The effect is subtle enough that only those comparing datasets notice it, yet once seen, it is unmistakable. Specialists in satellite imagery note that government agencies often request the blurring of strategic sites, nuclear facilities, military airfields, intelligence compounds, but such edits are exceedingly rare for natural geography. Antarctica, a place without private citizens or infrastructure, should have no reason for censorship. Those who have studied the phenomenon trace its boundaries with precision, approximately 70° S latitude and 11° E longitude, extending in an irregular ellipse across 50 kilometres. Within this space lie glacial ridges and crevasses documented by old survey missions but absent from new imagery. Curiously, declassified Cold War documents refer to this same coordinate band as a restricted overflight zone, enforced by international agreement during joint scientific operations in the 1980s. The stated purpose was to prevent interference with geophysical instruments, though the justification has long been questioned. If instruments required protection, why restrict only this particular section of the continent, and why preserve that restriction into the digital age? A handful of independent explorers have attempted to approach the site, but the terrain and regulations make such journeys almost impossible. Aircraft require permits months in advance, and land vehicles must adhere to environmental corridors designated by the Antarctic Treaty System. Unauthorized landings can result in permanent expulsion from future expeditions. In 2016, a Norwegian adventure pilot claimed to have flown near the coordinates and observed a grid-like structure beneath the ice. His footage, later uploaded online, was dismissed by experts as an optical illusion caused by sunlight refracting through the aircraft's window. The video has since disappeared from most platforms, resurfacing only in mirrored clips of uncertain origin. Scientists often warn against attaching intrigue to mere technical gaps. Blurring, they say, can result from corrupted data packets or failed sensor calibration. And yet, these same scientists quietly acknowledge that most gaps are corrected within months, while this one has persisted across multiple missions and generations of satellites. Even with the launch of NASA's ISAT-2 in 2018, capable of measuring snow depth with centimetre accuracy, the same void remains, a digital blindfold wrapped around a specific portion of the ice. Those who study Antarctic secrecy suggest another explanation, that certain research zones are classified not because of what is built there, but because of what lies beneath. Beneath kilometres of ice, radar surveys have revealed massive subsurface anomalies, circular patterns, magnetic variations, and what some geophysicists cautiously term non-uniform density formations. These could be ancient geological structures, iron-rich deposits, or remnants of meteor impacts. But in the human imagination, they become something else. Traces of civilizations predating known history, or installations preserved by ice and silence. Whatever the truth, the result is the same, a permanent erasure on the world's most open continent. Pilots still chart their flight paths around the zone. Satellite images are cropped before they reach public archives, and researchers, when asked directly about the blank, tend to answer with the language of omission. No available data, no usable imagery, no comment on that sector. The words vary, but the emptiness remains. In an age where every shoreline, mountain and crater can be viewed from orbit, the persistence of a single dark patch on the map carries its own quiet warning. Somewhere within the endless white, there is a place the world has agreed not to see, and perhaps what hides there has been watching the rest of us all along. the hidden city of Russia's closed towns, Ozyorsk and Company. For decades, entire families lived in a place that did not officially exist. Letters sent from outside the Soviet Union were returned with no destination found, and even within its own borders, travellers who asked about the name Ozyorsk were met with blank stares. The residents of this invisible city had addresses that referred only to distant post offices and numbers: Chelyabinsk 40, or later Chelyabinsk 65, identifiers designed to reveal nothing. Yet behind the veil of those digits lay streets, apartment blocks, and schools where citizens moved through their lives as if suspended between reality and omission. The creation of Ozyorsk marked one of the most secretive undertakings in the Soviet Union's history. In the closing years of World War II, the USSR launched a project to rival the Manhattan Project, a nuclear program that would ensure its status as a global superpower. The government needed not only laboratories and factories, but also entire settlements sealed from the public eye. These were not ordinary industrial towns, but self-contained societies constructed to sustain nuclear production under total secrecy. Ozyorsk, founded in 1946 near Lake Irtysh in the Ural Mountains, became the heart of that hidden network, home to the Mayak Production Association, one of the world's first plutonium reprocessing facilities. In those early years, maps were redrawn and names erased. Engineers, soldiers and scientists were transported to the site under military guard and ordered never to speak of their work. Their families followed, entering a world enclosed by double barbed wire fences and patrolled by armed sentries. To outsiders, the region appeared as a blank expanse of forest. Even government-issued atlases omitted its coordinates. The residents themselves could not leave without permission from Moscow, and even letters sent to relatives bore only coded return addresses. Within the gates, though, life resembled an idealized Soviet town. Schools, cinemas and playgrounds, all provided by the state in exchange for loyalty and silence. Those who lived there described a sense of both privilege and imprisonment. Rations were plentiful, consumer goods were easier to find, and children grew up believing they were serving something greater than themselves. Yet the secrecy came at a human cost. Neighbours watched one another, and every conversation could be overheard by informants. Visitors were forbidden, and residents who requested transfers or attempted escape faced interrogation by the KGB. The city's identity depended on being invisible, and so even the people inside it became invisible to the wider world. Cartography itself was forced into deception. Soviet mapmakers were instructed to erase or disguise the locations of closed cities, creating deliberate distortions in national maps. Sometimes forests appeared where factories stood, sometimes whole lakes vanished into nothing. The Soviet Geodesy and Cartography Committee oversaw this deception, producing dual versions of maps, one for classified government use, the other for the public distribution. The second version was fiction by design, ensuring that even a trained geographer would never locate Ozyorsk, Sarov, or any of their counterparts. Only in the 1990s did international researchers begin to piece together the true geography of these hidden zones. Within Ozyorsk, the work at Mayak never ceased. Plutonium for the Soviet Union's first atomic bomb was produced there in 1949, and for decades afterward, the facility continued to reprocess nuclear waste and weapon materials. The dangers of such secrecy soon became evident. In 1957, a massive explosion ripped through one of Mayak's underground waste tanks, sending radioactive debris into the atmosphere. The event, later called the Kishtim disaster, remains one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. But the Soviet government denied everything. Villages contaminated by radiation were evacuated overnight, erased from maps, and their names removed from public records. Survivors were forbidden to speak, and the region's cartographic void widened, the damage buried beneath state censorship. When Western intelligence agencies later analysed aerial photographs, they found peculiar anomalies: fence compounds in dense forest, power lines leading to nowhere, and worker settlements lacking official designations. These images confirmed what defectors and scientists had hinted at, that the Soviet Union had created dozens of closed administrative, territorial entities, each built for nuclear, military or scientific use. Some, like Sarov, Azimuth 16, and Zheleznogorsk, Krasnoyarsk 26, developed advanced weapons. Others, like Ozyorsk, continued to handle radioactive materials long after the Cold War ended. Each had its own post office number, its own invisible boundary, and its own absence on maps. The legacy of these secret cities did not end with the Soviet Union's collapse. In the 1990s, Russia reclassified many of them but maintained restrictions on access and documentation. Ozyorsk remained closed, its borders patrolled, and its administrative status unchanged. Residents were allowed to travel only with special permission, and foreign visitors required federal clearance that could take months or never arrive. The local population, around 80,000, continued to live in a reality disconnected from the rest of Russia, where everyday conveniences existed beside lingering radiation and the remnants of Cold War paranoia. Environmental studies later revealed that the Techa River, flowing through the region, carried radioactive contamination for hundreds of kilometers, affecting thousands of villages downstream. Medical researchers documented unusually high cancer rates and genetic disorders among residents, but official acknowledgement remained limited. Even so, the city retained its aura of pride, a belief that secrecy was still a kind of service. It was a paradox inherited from its founding. The people of Ozyorsk were both victims of secrecy and its last defenders. Digital technology has changed little. On Google Maps and Yandex Maps, Ozyorsk appears today as an ordinary settlement, but close inspection reveals blurred boundaries and missing street-level imagery. Satellite photographs show controlled perimeters and isolated compounds, yet even modern mapping services omit details of Mayak's facilities. The secrecy has adapted to the digital age, maintained not by censorship alone, but by bureaucratic silence, a relic of an era when absence was a form of power. To this day, Ozyorsk remains one of the few functioning closed cities in the world. The fences have not rusted away, and new checkpoints still guard the road from Chelyabinsk. Visitors must pass through layers of verification, and local guides speak cautiously, their voices echoing the discipline of decades. The people inside still live their daily lives. Children walk to school, scientists go to work, musicians perform at the town's cultural centre, but always within invisible walls. Beyond those walls, maps continue to lie quietly, preserving the illusion that the city and all it once concealed was never truly there at all. The censored airbase of the Netherlands' Volkel airbase. From above, it looks like a smudge, a patch of static where precision should be. The landscape of North Brabant spreads in clean geometric fields until it meets a sudden distortion, a grey blur where runways should be, faint outlines dissolving into digital fog. On early versions of Google Earth, Volkel Air Base was a place that refused to come into focus, a deliberate absence in a nation known for its transparency. To the casual observer, it was nothing more than an airfield, but those who knew its history understood that such blurring was never accidental. It marked a space where maps faltered and silence grew. Volkel Air Base began its existence not in secrecy but in necessity. Built in 1940 under German occupation, it served as a Luftwaffe airfield before being bombed and reclaimed by Allied forces. In the decades that followed, the base evolved alongside Europe's recovery, a relic of war transformed into a cornerstone of NATO defence. The Netherlands, though small, became a critical link in the Western Alliance, its air bases prepared for a confrontation that was expected but never came. The Cold War turned ordinary landscapes into hidden arsenals, and Volkel's open runways concealed a new kind of invisibility, the quiet storage of weapons that could end nations. When the world turned digital, the base retreated into pixels. As commercial satellite imagery blossomed in the early 2000s, governments worldwide confronted an unfamiliar dilemma: transparency at a scale that could not be controlled. Many countries responded by blurring or omitting sensitive installations, and the Netherlands was among them. In an era where borders could be zoomed into by anyone with an internet connection, the nation's most secure airfield dissolved into indistinct tones. The blurred square over Volkel became a new kind of camouflage, one that belonged not to the physical realm, but to the realm of data and perception. It was a place hidden in plain sight, not by walls or fences, but by algorithms. The truth broke through not by accident, but by leak. In 2013, documents from former NSA contractor Edward Snowden surfaced, revealing that US tactical nuclear weapons were indeed stored in Europe, and among the listed sites was Volkel Air Base. The Dutch government neither confirmed nor denied the claim, maintaining a silence that had lasted decades. Yet within days, retired officials and former pilots began to speak in guarded terms, acknowledging what had long been whispered. The so-called double key system, in which both US and Dutch forces shared control of B-61 nuclear bombs, had anchored this secrecy since the 1960s. The revelation didn't just expose a hidden arsenal, it illuminated how a democratic country maintained one of the world's oldest nuclear mysteries without ever naming it aloud. In the Netherlands, secrecy has never shouted. It murmurs. The culture of Dutch governance, steeped in consensus and restraint, treats silence as a form of diplomacy. Unlike the loud secrecy of authoritarian states, Dutch secrecy blends into ordinary life, becoming part of the social fabric. Residents of nearby Uden and Volkel drive past the base daily, their routes tracing the perimeter of one of Europe's most heavily guarded zones, yet conversation about what lies within remains minimal. Even local historians, meticulous in cataloguing every trace of wartime history, tend to pause when the subject turns to the modern base. In a country where openness is a civic virtue, this single location embodies the paradox of discretion, a place both acknowledged and denied. Beyond its perimeter fence, life moves with deceptive calm. Cycling paths cut through pine forests that once echoed with jet engines, and rural houses stand within earshot of fighter jets that occasionally thunder overhead. Inside, reinforced shelters line the runways, hardened vaults built to withstand nuclear detonation, each marked by numbers but never by names. US personnel rotate quietly in and out, part of a long-standing arrangement under NATO's nuclear sharing policy. The official narrative refers only to storage capabilities, yet aviation observers have long identified the telltale features: double fences, motion sensors, earth-covered bunkers known as WS-3 vaults. Each detail confirms the pattern while stopping short of proof, sustaining the equilibrium between knowing and not knowing. When questioned, Dutch leaders perform a choreography of avoidance refined over generations. In 2013, when former Prime Minister Ruud Lubbers casually admitted in an interview that nuclear bombs were indeed stored at Volkel, the government quickly distanced itself. "We do not comment on nuclear matters," came the familiar reply. The same phrase had appeared in parliamentary transcripts since the Cold War's peak, its repetition a ritual of denial and acknowledgement intertwined. Even within NATO, official reports never name the base directly. It exists as a footnote, a necessary omission that keeps treaties intact and politics unruffled. Secrecy, in this sense, is not deception. It is stability maintained through selective silence. What makes Volkel's concealment particularly modern is that it depends not on fences or files, but on perception itself. The blurring on satellite maps is no longer as complete as it once was. Digital imagery improved and restrictions eased slightly, yet the habit of not looking too closely persists. Analysts can trace the runways, count aircraft shelters, and even identify aircraft types, but the human mind still registers the base as somehow invisible. The very act of partial revelation reinforces its aura. To know too much would break the unspoken agreement between citizens and state, between image and truth. The tension surrounding Volkel also mirrors a broader European unease. Across the continent, Cold War relics linger in quiet corners: underground bunkers in Germany, decommissioned silos in Italy, sealed depots in Belgium, each bound by the same silence. These are not places of active warfare, but of suspended consequence, their power lying in the uncertainty they preserve. Volkel's blurred image on a global map becomes a symbol for all of them, a lingering shadow of a divided century that refuses to fade. Its mystery is not simply that of a hidden weapon, but of a society that has learned to coexist with secrecy without protest, as though the unknown were an accepted neighbour. Even now, satellite maps display the outlines of Volkel, but the clarity never returns. Technology may expose the Earth's every contour, yet this single patch remains slightly off, slightly dulled, as though the digital world still respects an older code. Each pixel seems to hold back just enough information to sustain the myth. Travellers who pass above see nothing remarkable. A line of runways, a few rows of hangars. Yet beneath that facade lies one of Europe's deepest silences. It is a place where visibility ends and history continues unseen. Somewhere beneath that quiet blur, the present still hides its oldest secret. The Indian Atomic Research Campus, Bhabha Atomic Research Centre. There are places where silence feels engineered. where even the air seems instructed not to echo. In the bustling heart of Mumbai, amid the cacophony of traffic, markets, and the salt-scented wind off the Arabian Sea, one enclave moves to an entirely different rhythm. Horns blare and pedestrians weave around one another. But here, behind invisible perimeters, the pulse is controlled, measured, deliberate. The city's chaos stops at the threshold, leaving an almost unnatural quiet, a pause that hints at the presence of forces far older and far more potent than the ordinary rhythms of daily life. That silence found its strongest form in the vision of one man who believed knowledge could anchor a nation's future. Homi Jahangir Bhabha, trained in the corridors of Cambridge and inspired by the promise of modern physics, imagined an India that would no longer borrow light from others. His vision extended beyond theory and into structures of power, reactors, laboratories and experimental facilities that would harness atomic science for energy, industry and, if necessary, defense. In his mind, secrecy was not deception but a necessary shield, a protective measure for a fledgling nation entering a world of espionage, ideological rivalry and nuclear ambition. After 1947, India's independence brought not only the right to speak but the right to withhold. The geopolitical landscape demanded prudence. International scrutiny was constant, Western powers monitored progress, and internal factions debated whether the pursuit of nuclear capability was ethical, feasible, or desirable. Within this context, the Bhabha Atomic Research Centre became more than a research campus. It became a statement. Every reactor commissioned, every experiment conducted, was a mark of sovereign capability. Yet alongside public achievements, there existed layers of undisclosed work, projects classified not merely by government decree, but by the intrinsic need to protect knowledge that could alter regional and global balances. Only then does the story turn toward Trombay, a coastal enclave chosen not for beauty but for control. Its geography offers both accessibility and isolation. Proximity to Mumbai's infrastructure facilitates movement of personnel and equipment, yet the surrounding mangroves and salt flats create natural buffers, difficult to penetrate and easy to monitor. Even now, visitors notice subtle restrictions, roads that curve inexplicably, checkposts that appear without warning, and fences that seem to multiply, folding space in ways that disorient the outsider. In the design of the campus, geography itself becomes an instrument of secrecy, blending natural advantage with human ingenuity. Inside, laboratories were built to resist intrusion, with corridors that seem to fold back on themselves like a design meant to forget. From high-security reactor halls to controlled access chemistry labs, the environment enforces discipline as much as it protects information. Security systems, advanced in layers both visible and invisible, ensure that even personnel rarely see the full scope of the facility. Airflow is filtered, radiation is monitored, and movement is tracked, a choreography of precision that turns the everyday act of walking into a performance of compliance. Each piece of equipment, each protocol reinforces a culture in which knowledge is both treasure and responsibility, visible only in fragments to those entrusted with it. The outside world took notice in patterns, unmarked shipments arriving at odd hours, flights following coded schedules, and communications that seemed to predate suspicion. During the Cold War, Western intelligence agencies tracked India's burgeoning nuclear capabilities with fascination and apprehension, noting not only the existence of reactors and test sites, but the subtle signals of a nation asserting scientific autonomy. International treaties and inspections were navigated with careful transparency, offering glimpses of progress while withholding the full spectrum of research. These patterns, discernible to experts yet invisible to the public eye, lent Trombay an aura of mystery that persists today, a mix of technical sophistication and deliberate opacity. Those who worked within the fences lived two versions of their lives, one spoken, one silent. Scientists, engineers, and administrators carried the weight of their discoveries in secrecy, conscious that the world outside might never understand the magnitude of their labour. Letters and reports moved on closed circuits. Meetings were held in rooms shielded from electronic eavesdropping, and even casual conversation followed strict protocols. Colleagues spoke in partial truths or used euphemism when interacting beyond the perimeter, embedding habit into the culture of containment. Their dedication, meticulous yet invisible, shaped not only India's atomic program but a social contract of trust and discretion that defined the campus itself. Even in the satellite age, Trombay remains oddly faint, its images softened, its angles blurred, its name often replaced by code. Digital mapping services, governed by both law and national policy, obscure the campus from easy inspection. Roads and boundaries are visible, but precise internal layouts are unavailable, shielding the core from both public curiosity and international scrutiny. This deliberate opacity extends the tradition of secrecy into a new medium, where pixels and algorithms become instruments of containment. The map, in this sense, becomes as much a part of the institution as the reactors themselves. A digital camouflage reinforcing a legacy that began with Parber's vision and persists in the modern world. Perhaps every secret facility builds its own myth, a kind of invisible monument to what cannot be told. In Trombay, the myth is not imposed, but cultivated by the very nature of the work, the simultaneous revelation and concealment of atomic power. Visitors sense it in the weight of silence, in the calculated rhythm of operations, and in the careful management of visibility. The campus exists as both a physical space and an idea, a place where human ambition, national security, and the boundaries of knowledge converge. Its presence is at once undeniable and elusive, a reminder that some forces once harnessed demand both reverence and discretion. What glows there in silence is not the atom's fire, but the cost of keeping it contained. The island of the uncontacted, North Sentinel Island. The sea arrives first, a ring of restless waves that swallow the horizon before revealing a single green smudge. From a distance it might seem ordinary, just another island among the Andaman archipelago, yet the air itself carries an unspoken warning. Mariners speak of currents that shift without reason, of birds that vanish as they near the shore, and of a silence that is heavier than the wind itself. Even before one sets foot near its reefs, North Sentinel Island asserts its presence not through walls or fences, but through a natural and uncompromising authority, a place that refuses to be approached. Long before maps tried to chart it, outsiders glimpsed the edge of a world they could not enter. Early colonial records mentioned fleeting encounters, the glimpses of dark figures on the beaches, bows drawn and arrows ready, an unyielding stance against foreign intrusion. Traders, ship captains, and even naval officers noted the unusual hostility, yet details remained sparse, filtered through reports that grew contradictory over time. Some speculated that the tribe's fierceness was ritualized defense. Others suggested survival instincts honed by centuries of isolation. The island itself, often blank on maps, seemed to mirror the opacity of the people who lived there. Jagged coral reefs and dense mangroves form a natural barricade, separating curiosity from reality. The waters around the island are treacherous, hiding jagged outcrops and sudden drops that challenge even experienced navigators. Mangrove roots create labyrinthine coastal defences that impede landing and observation, while thick forest cover prevents aerial scrutiny from revealing much more than shadow and canopy. These natural features are a mirror of human choice. The Sentinelese have deliberately maintained their isolation, but the island amplifies their autonomy, turning geography into a shield. It is an ecosystem designed by both nature and the tribe to remain impervious, a living fortress where intrusion is measured in survival rather than law. Anthropologists learned patience, observing from boats and aerial vantage points while the island held its silence. Remote studies used long lenses, aircraft flights at altitudes that minimize provocation, and later satellite imagery to estimate population, map the terrain, and track seasonal changes. Researchers noted dwellings, cleared areas for agriculture, and small movements along the shoreline, yet these glimpses offered only fragments of understanding. The Sentinelese culture, rich and self-contained, resisted translation, a living system that could not be fully decoded. Every observation reinforced the lesson that proximity does not equal knowledge. The closer one comes, the less is revealed. The Indian government decreed what scientists and sailors already knew: some doors must remain closed. Legislation now prohibits travel within 5 nautical miles of the island, imposing fines and imprisonment for violations. The intent is both ethical and practical: to protect the tribe from diseases to which they have no immunity, and to respect their centuries-long determination to remain uncontacted. Official maps reflect this enforced distance, with blank spaces or censored layers where detailed depictions might appear. The law, in effect, enshrines the principle that some human habitats are deliberately uncharted, that sovereignty in isolation can be as significant as any recognised territory. In the satellite era, North Sentinel Island appears faintly, a pixelated secret on high-resolution screens. Advances in aerial surveillance have shown minimal detail, capturing vegetation patterns, coastlines, and occasional smoke signals without compromising privacy. Modern cartography acknowledges not just physical geography but ethical boundaries, a recognition that mapping is a moral act as much as a technical one. Even Google Earth and other digital platforms reflect these restrictions. The island is often blurred or deliberately generalised, a rare acknowledgement that human choice can override the ambition to chart everything visible from above. Life here thrives under strict rules, written not on paper but in practice, passed silently from generation to generation. The Sentinelese subsist through fishing, foraging and limited horticulture, crafting canoes, nets and tools without external assistance. Each pattern of life is honed to balance sustainability with secrecy. Observers note that social structures are maintained through ritual and familial hierarchy, yet outsiders can only infer, never confirm the details. In this way, the tribe enforces its own containment, an internal governance that operates alongside natural isolation, ensuring that knowledge of their world remains almost entirely theirs. Seasonal storms test the island's resilience, and the Sentinelese respond with rituals that outsiders can only glimpse from afar. Observers note that, during the monsoon, the tribe adjusts their dwellings, relocates fires, and reinforces canoe storage, all with remarkable coordination and speed. Smoke signals rise in patterns interpreted by anthropologists as communication across the island's terrain, and movement along the shoreline appears synchronized with the tides and wind direction. While no outsider can verify the meaning of these practices, they reveal a society deeply attuned to its environment, where survival and secrecy coexist in delicate balance. These patterns underscore how human ingenuity can thrive entirely outside global observation, a living example of adaptation that eludes both maps and modern surveillance. Every intrusion carries consequence: disease, aggression, and the stark reminder that isolation can be absolute. Several documented attempts at contact ended in violence or fatal misunderstandings, underscoring the risks for both the tribe and those who approach. Historical cases, from colonial expeditions to modern fishermen inadvertently drifting too close, show a consistent pattern. The Sentinelese defend their territory relentlessly. Beyond physical defence, the island serves as a barrier against cultural contamination and biological threats. The consequences of ignoring these boundaries are not theoretical. They are immediate, visceral, and tragic, reinforcing the lesson that the unknown is sometimes deliberately protected. The world may circle it with ships and satellites, but the island refuses to surrender its story. No expedition has fully penetrated its forests, and few records capture more than fragments of daily life. Even the most advanced technology, drones, infrared imaging, or long-range observation, reveals only traces, shadows of activity, smoke from fires, or occasional movement along the shoreline. The mystery of the Sentinelese is not just their hostility, but their enduring autonomy, a testament to the human capacity to resist observation, interference, and incorporation into global systems. The island's silence speaks more loudly than any map, any report, or any attempt at understanding. The forest hums with a quiet defiance, preserving secrets that no map can capture. The subterranean vault hidden in the north, Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Every species carries a story, but the world has no guarantee those stories will survive. The fragility of life is an unspoken truth, one most humans ignore until scarcity or catastrophe reminds them. From the wheat of ancient civilizations to the rare pulses of distant highlands, the continuity of crops has always depended on fragile chains of care. In a modern world shaped by climate change, political instability, and technological upheaval, these chains are no longer reliable. Somewhere in the Arctic, a vault stands as a quiet testament to foresight, a repository of hope where millions of seeds wait in silence, each one a potential saviour for the uncertain future of humanity. History is littered with hunger, famine, and seeds that failed to endure the seasons of conflict. The Irish potato famine, the Dust Bowl in the United States, and localized crop failures across Asia and Africa illustrate the devastating consequences of agricultural vulnerability. In the late 20th century, scientists and policymakers recognized that globalized dependence on a few staple crops left the world perilously exposed. The idea emerged that if genetic diversity could be preserved, even in the face of war, natural disaster or environmental collapse, humanity might avoid repeating such tragedies. The seed vault was conceived not as a monument to science alone, but as an insurance policy for life itself, bridging centuries with frozen patience. At the edge of the Arctic, mountains rise from frozen fjords, offering both isolation and natural defence. Svalbard, an archipelago halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole, was chosen for its remoteness and geological stability. Surrounded by tundra and glaciers, the landscape is inhospitable, yet its harshness is exactly what makes it ideal. The permafrost acts as a natural refrigeration system, slowing decay and providing a constant environment for the seeds stored within. Snowdrifts, polar nights, and biting winds create a barrier that discourages intrusion, reinforcing the security of the vault with the same quiet force that shelters the animals and lichens adapted to this extreme ecosystem. Engineers tunneled into permafrost not for spectacle, but for permanence, designing walls to withstand centuries. The vault is carved deep into a sandstone mountain, its corridors reinforced with concrete and steel to endure both natural and human threats. Temperature controls maintain the interior at -18 degrees Celsius, preserving viability across generations, while backup systems and redundant storage chambers ensure continuity even in the event of mechanical failure. Access is strictly limited, governed by both international agreements and local regulations, turning the facility into a labyrinth of protective protocols where precision and foresight dominate every design choice. Inside the vault, millions of seeds sleep in silent order, each a genetic testament to the planet's diversity. Packaged in vacuum-sealed, nitrogen-filled envelopes, they range from staple grains like wheat and rice to rare legumes, tubers, and medicinal plants. Each seed carries not only the potential to regenerate a crop, but also centuries of adaptation to climate, soil, and human cultivation. Researchers can track origin, species, and viability, yet no one can predict the circumstances in which they may be called upon. In this frozen chamber, life is preserved as a promise, a latent force suspended in ice, awaiting a future that is as fragile as it is unknown. Every retrieval is a careful operation, a measured dance between cold, time, and fragile life. When seeds are requested for reintroduction into the world, staff must thaw and inspect them with extreme precision to prevent damage. The process involves sterile laboratories, controlled humidity, and strict tracking to ensure no cross-contamination occurs. Even a single misstep could render an entire batch non-viable. National gene banks and agricultural researchers coordinate closely with Svalbard staff, planning logistics months. Each shipment embodies more than biological material. It carries global responsibility, representing potential recovery after crop failures or ecological disasters. The meticulous care required underscores that while the vault stores life in suspended animation, awakening that life is equally delicate and critical. Nations deliver their hopes wrapped in sterile envelopes, depositing fragments of tomorrow under Arctic watch. The vault functions as a global collaboration, receiving contributions from nearly every continent, including countries that are often at odds politically. Each shipment represents trust, careful preparation, and an acknowledgement that survival may depend on cooperation rather than conquest. The logistics are meticulous. Seeds arrive labelled, catalogued, and temperature-checked before being stored in their designated slots. Even in this cold and isolated environment, human intention shapes the patterns of life, a quiet choreography of preservation spanning cultures, languages, and hemispheres. Even here, nature whispers threats, thawing permafrost, rising waters, and the possibility that time itself may betray the design. In 2016, unusually warm conditions led to minor flooding in the entrance tunnel, highlighting the vulnerability of even the most carefully engineered systems. While the seeds themselves remained secure, the event underscored that no vault, however remote or technologically advanced, is immune to global environmental changes. Engineers responded with drainage improvements, but the incident serves as a reminder that preservation is never absolute. Human foresight can delay decay, but it cannot command the shifting forces of climate or time. The vault also serves as a mirror, reflecting humanity's own awareness of mortality and responsibility. Here, the interplay between fragility and control becomes tangible. We attempt to preserve the future, even as uncertainty grows in the present. Scientists and policymakers contemplate scenarios ranging from localized crop failure to global ecological collapse, always aware that the vault is only a safeguard, not a solution. Its existence challenges assumptions about permanence and power, emphasizing that life, even stored, catalogued, and frozen, remains subject to circumstances beyond comprehension. The Arctic Vault stands as both monument and warning, a quiet sentinel for what we may yet lose. Humanity may gaze upon the vault as a monument, yet it is also a reminder that survival is never guaranteed. Each corridor, each frozen package, and each precise label is a symbol of careful calculation, yet the ultimate test lies not in planning but in time, disaster, and the unknowable. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault is at once a sanctuary and a riddle, a place where the ordinary act of preservation becomes extraordinary, and where the stakes are measured in the survival of species rather than individuals. It is an artifact of hope, but hope that rests upon the fragile intersection of human endeavour and the natural world. Beneath the eternal ice, life waits silently, holding its breath for a future we cannot yet imagine. The Russian Arctic archipelago blur Severnaya Zemlya. On digital maps, the northern archipelago appears as a blur, a patch where pixels refuse to clarify. Observers scrolling over the Arctic Ocean notice irregularities, coastlines smeared into indistinct shapes, ice fields merging into empty grids, and certain sections entirely obscured. Unlike other regions where satellite imaging produces sharp, precise details, Severnaya Zemlya seems to resist documentation. The digital fog prompts both fascination and frustration among cartographers and explorers. The anomaly raises questions. Is it a technical glitch, the result of natural reflectivity from ice and snow, or an intentional act of concealment by authorities overseeing the region? Regardless, the archipelago exerts an immediate air of mystery simply by refusing to be fully known. In the early 20th century, explorers struggled through pack ice, naming islands that few would ever see firsthand. Norwegian and Russian expeditions charted parts of the archipelago, often contending with treacherous ice flows and unpredictable weather. The first comprehensive survey was conducted in 1913, when Boris Wilkitsky navigated through channels partially hidden beneath snow and fog. Subsequent explorations added detail, yet vast areas remained uncharted for decades. Even today, historians marvel at the endurance and skill required to navigate these waters before modern navigation, imagining men and ships battered by Arctic storms while recording rough coastlines and frozen passages that were sometimes no wider than the hull of a ship. Glaciers stretch for miles, carving fjords into jagged cliffs, their frozen rivers impervious to human marking. Severnaya Zemlya's islands are predominantly covered by ice caps that dominate the terrain, leaving little room for vegetation or permanent human habitation. Mountains rise abruptly from the frozen surface, and narrow channels separate the islands in a labyrinth of fjords and straits. The severe Arctic climate produces months of polar night, during which temperatures plunge well below -30 degrees Celsius, and months of endless sun that reflect off the ice in blinding brilliance. This extreme geography creates natural barriers to exploration, contributing to the archipelago's hidden status and reinforcing the perception that it exists as much in maps as it does in imagination. Life endures where humans rarely tread, from Arctic foxes to colonies of seabirds clinging to icy cliffs. Despite the harsh climate and near-permanent ice cover, Severnaya Zemlya supports pockets of resilient life. Arctic foxes traverse frozen plains, hunting in near-total silence. Seabird colonies nest along jagged coastlines, their survival dependent on precise seasonal timing and access to open water. Marine mammals, including ringed seals and occasional walruses, use the surrounding icy waters for breeding and feeding. Vegetation is sparse but remarkable. Mosses, lichens, and hardy Arctic plants cling to exposed rock in summer, forming microecosystems that endure brutal winter conditions. These ecological enclaves demonstrate that, even in a place largely hidden from maps, life continues in quiet, fragile harmony, a reminder that the unseen can be vibrant and complex. Satellite sensors often fail here, reflecting sun, ice, and extreme cold in ways that confound even the most advanced instruments. Areas of Severnaya Zemlya are consistently blurred on publicly accessible mapping services, while some high-resolution images are restricted, possibly due to Russian oversight or military concerns. The reflective ice makes imaging difficult, scattering light and creating digital distortions that confuse algorithms designed for temperate landscapes. Even remote sensing technologies such as radar and infrared encounter challenges, with ice sheets absorbing or deflecting signals in unpredictable patterns. The result is a persistent patch of uncertainty, where neither natural nor technological precision fully penetrates the frozen terrain. Researchers study core samples and ice flows to unravel climate history, yet much remains obscured beneath the surface. Glaciologists extract cores thousands of meters deep, revealing layers of ice that record centuries of snowfall, temperature variation, and atmospheric composition. The region provides insight into global climate patterns, with some cores revealing evidence of volcanic eruptions and atmospheric pollution travelling from distant continents. Meanwhile, oceanographers monitor adjacent waters, tracking shifting currents and melting ice that could influence sea level rise worldwide. These scientific endeavours underscore that Severnaya Zemlya is not merely a cartographic curiosity, but a vital repository of environmental knowledge, essential for understanding the planet's past and predicting its future. Russia enforces oversight over the islands, blending administration with secrecy in territories few outsiders may enter. Access requires government permits, and much of the archipelago is classified under military and strategic interests. Satellite imagery released publicly is sometimes censored or blurred in certain regions, adding to the sense of deliberate concealment. Military installations and monitoring stations exist in some areas, though details are scarce, leaving speculation to fill the gaps. For foreign scientists, access is both difficult and tightly regulated, meaning that on-the-ground observations are rare and often brief. The combination of remoteness, extreme climate, and geopolitical control ensures that Severnaya Zemlya remains one of the least observed inhabited spaces on Earth. Each attempted survey delivers partial images, fractured coastlines, incomplete topography, and questions that multiply. When expeditions approach the islands, they encounter dense fog, shifting ice, and sudden storms, complicating mapping and photography. Satellite images that do exist often capture frozen landscapes that appear indistinguishable from each other, reinforcing the archipelago's aura of invisibility. Cartographers and researchers attempting to reconcile historical maps with modern data face anomalies, with islands sometimes appearing distorted or missing entirely. This layering of human error, environmental complexity, and technological limitation creates a persistent enigma, a place where curiosity collides with impossibility and where the line between what is real and what is conjecture blurs like the ice itself. Though charts and maps offer hints, the archipelago keeps its full truth buried beneath ice, snow, and deliberate obscurity. Even with decades of Arctic research, the islands retain a sense of secrecy that no satellite or chart can fully pierce. Modern technologies reveal some aspects: topography, ice movement, and geological formations, but the interplay of extreme conditions and limited human access ensures that the region remains enigmatic. To scholars, explorers, and the general public, Severnaya Zemlya serves as a reminder that some places resist documentation, that the Earth still harbours corners where the unknown persists despite human ambition and technological advancement. Within the pixelated Arctic expanse, secrets endure that no lens has yet fully revealed. The Brazilian venom island, Ilha de Queimada Grande, Snake Island. The island breathes through venom, its every inch claimed by serpents that strike with uncanny precision. Here, the golden lancehead, a pit viper found nowhere else on Earth, dominates the terrain. Estimates suggest 1 snake per square metre in some regions, creating a lethal labyrinth of coiled bodies, darting tongues, and watchful eyes. The very air seems tense, filled with the subtle hiss of movement across rocks, roots, and decaying leaves. From a distance, Ilha de Queimada Grande appears serene, a small patch of green jutting from the Atlantic, off Brazil's Sao Paulo coast. Yet those who step closer confront a domain governed entirely by its most venomous inhabitants, a place where human presence is not merely unwelcome but potentially fatal. Centuries ago, sailors whispered of a place where stepping ashore could be fatal, and the legend solidified into lore. Historical accounts from the 16th century describe mariners who recorded sudden, unexplained deaths or missing crew members near this cluster of rocky cliffs. Over time, colonial authorities imposed strict access restrictions, and today the Brazilian government forbids casual visits entirely. Only scientists with official permits may set foot on the island, and even then, precautions are stringent. Legal documentation reinforces the peril. Anyone approaching without authorization risks both the snake's venom and civil penalties. The island has transformed from a maritime legend into a real-world fortress of biological danger. Towering palms and rocky cliffs provide a maze of shade and shelter, a microcosm of life isolated by water. Measuring roughly 43 hectares, the island hosts a unique ecosystem shaped by its separation from the mainland. Soil pockets support resilient shrubs, mosses, and flowering plants, while rocky outcrops offer ideal ambush points for reptiles. Seasonal rains transform the terrain, swelling tiny streams that feed both flora and fauna. The cliffs plunge into surrounding waters teeming with fish, attracting occasional seabirds. Despite its small size, the island sustains a remarkably complex web of life, all interacting within boundaries naturally enforced by isolation and the relentless presence of snakes. Encircling the island, the ocean itself seems to enforce its solitude, currents swirling with stealth and unpredictability. The surrounding Atlantic waters create a natural barrier that further limits human approach. Strong currents, hidden reefs, and sudden storms make landing by boat perilous, even for experienced sailors. These marine conditions, combined with the island's steep, rocky shoreline, ensure that only those with precise knowledge and careful planning can reach the land safely. Historical records indicate that several exploratory vessels in the 19th and early 20th centuries were forced to retreat or suffered damage when attempting to approach the cliffs. This aquatic defense complements the island's biological defenses, rendering Ilha de Queimada Grande one of the most inaccessible places in the world. The golden lancehead, one of the deadliest snakes on Earth, has evolved in isolation, each bite capable of ending a human life within hours. This pit viper's venom is particularly potent, a cocktail of hemotoxins and neurotoxins uniquely adapted to swiftly immobilize prey such as birds and small mammals. Its evolutionary path reflects both the scarcity of competitors and the abundance of prey in its confined habitat. Unlike mainland snakes, these vipers can strike with extreme accuracy from elevated positions, often from tree branches or among thick undergrowth. The density and lethality of these serpents create a natural barrier to exploration, making Ilha de Queimada Grande a place where human presence is almost always ill-advised. Scientists approach with extreme caution, measuring density, behavior, and venom potency with remote tools and protective gear. Periodic expeditions involve long-range cameras, GPS tracking, and carefully planned sampling. Observations reveal that the snakes exhibit territorial behavior, with mature individuals dominating prime hunting areas and juveniles relying on stealth and concealment. Researchers study how the golden lancehead's venom has adapted over generations to prey types and environmental pressures, providing valuable insight into evolutionary biology and toxinology. Every excursion requires meticulous planning. One misstep could render months of preparation meaningless and transform a controlled study into a medical emergency. Occasionally, fishermen or thrill-seekers test the ban, leaving stories of rapid strikes and narrow escapes behind. Local legends warn of sudden, lethal encounters where humans trespass unknowingly into a snake's domain. Some accounts describe feet punctured by fangs while walking along the narrow shoreline, or tiny scratches erupting into venomous infections requiring immediate evacuation. These rare incidents underscore both the danger and allure of the island, which has become a symbol of forbidden fascination. Tales of daring or foolish visitors blend with scientific observations, creating a narrative where myth and reality converge in sharp, serpentine detail. Where the island's past meets its present, legends and modern science intersect, creating a narrative that is as much cultural as biological. Local folklore warns of sailors and fishermen vanishing after daring to approach the island, stories passed down for generations. The island has long held a place in Brazilian maritime consciousness, inspiring cautionary tales about its venomous rulers. Modern scientific expeditions, however, have confirmed these dangers, cataloguing both the lethal potential of the golden lancehead and the ecological richness of its habitat. Researchers also note that the snake population fluctuates seasonally, influenced by bird migration and reproductive cycles, making the island's ecosystem dynamic despite its small size. This interplay of legend and verified science emphasizes the tension between fear and curiosity, showing how knowledge and myth coexist in places deliberately kept out of reach. Life endures where humans rarely tread, from the dense undergrowth to rocky cliff edges, revealing adaptations shaped by isolation. The snake's survival depends on precision, climbing trees to ambush birds, slithering silently across mossy rocks, and retreating into crevices when disturbance arises. Birds nesting on the island exhibit behaviours evolved to avoid predation, while small rodents forage under the cover of vegetation. Even the plants contribute to the survival narrative. Thorny shrubs slow larger predators, while flowering cycles align with seasonal insect abundance. Every organism interacts with its environment in a delicate balance, a testament to evolution's quiet persistence. In a place cut off from the human gaze, Ilha de Queimada Grande remains a testament to nature's rule, where fear, fascination, and forbidden access intertwine. The island exemplifies how isolation, danger, and legal restriction can converge to create a location that is as much psychological as physical territory. Researchers, governments, and the public view it with awe and caution, acknowledging that despite maps, images, and legends, the island ultimately belongs to its wildlife. The golden lancehead's silent reign transforms every detail, a palm frond, a rocky crevice, a shaded underbrush, into part of a living system that humans can observe but rarely enter safely. Even when glimpsed from afar, the island whispers that some secrets are meant to remain untouched. The phantom atoll that never was, Sandy Island. For centuries, sailors whispered of a distant atoll, a land that seemed real enough to haunt maritime charts. Mariners passing north of New Caledonia described a low, sandy formation rising from the ocean, its presence noted with cautious optimism. The descriptions varied. Some claimed it was a small cluster of islets, others a single elongated stretch of land. These reports were rarely verified, yet enough captains observed or believed in the landmass that it gradually entered the collective consciousness of Pacific navigation. Despite its remoteness, the Phantom Island exerted a quiet authority on the maps of the 19th and early 20th centuries, where the line between observation and assumption often blurred. The first recorded sighting, logged in 1876 by the crew of the whaler Velocity, marked Sandy Island as a point of fascination. Captain J.R. Palmer reported coordinates that placed the atoll in a stretch of ocean that seemed, at the time, nearly devoid of landmarks. His log described a small sandy spit dotted with scrubby vegetation and surrounded by shallow waters. The report was concise yet persuasive enough for cartographers and fellow mariners to trust. Palmer's notation was the seed from which Sandy Island would grow in cartographic importance. Its reality assumed because no one had reason to dispute a whaler's careful observation in an era when open ocean verification was exceptionally challenging. Cartographers of Europe and the Pacific adopted the atoll unquestioningly, embedding it into nautical charts for decades. Maps printed in London, Paris, and Sydney all carried the mark of Sandy Island, often with the same coordinates first recorded by Palmer. The persistence was not merely due to habit, it reflected the trust in observational authority, the limitations of verification, and the high stakes of maritime navigation, where omitting a potential landmass could be disastrous. Even when subsequent explorers reported no land, cartographers hesitated to erase Sandy Island, a ghostly presence reinforced by the reputations of those who first charted it. Explorers ventured into the surrounding waters, only to return with the same bewildering report: nothing but open sea. Expeditions in the early 20th century sought the island for both practical and scientific reasons, including studies of marine life and potential anchorages. Crews would approach the reported coordinates and find only the rolling blue horizon. the waves extending in every direction as if mocking centuries of accepted cartography. These repeated failures did not immediately prompt removal from maps. Instead, the Phantom Atoll became a paradoxical blend of fact and fiction, a placeholder where uncertainty met human expectation. Some sailors speculated that currents and tides had swallowed the island whole, leaving only stories behind. Oceanographers later studied the Coral Sea and surrounding Pacific waters, confirming that no submerged shoals or reefs exist where Sandy Island had been charted. The area lies atop a deep-water trench, making the presence of any landmass physically impossible. Despite centuries of imagination and legend, modern geology showed conclusively that the atoll never existed. Yet, this scientific clarity did not diminish the island's allure. Instead, it heightened the mystery, suggesting that some myths survive even when the natural world denies them. Satellite imagery in the 21st century finally exposed the truth, revealing an endless ocean where land was once drawn. High-resolution surveys and remote sensing allowed geographers to scan the precise coordinates repeatedly, confirming there was no rise of sand or rock anywhere in the reported region. Oceanographic mapping corroborated these findings, showing depths consistent with open sea rather than submerged land. Modern tools eliminated ambiguity, yet the discovery was tinged with irony. An island that had existed in every nautical mind for nearly 150 years was now scientifically proven to be entirely imaginary. Yet for reasons both bureaucratic and habitual, the Phantom Island lingered in databases long after its disappearance was confirmed. Digital nautical charts, educational atlases, and even some GPS navigation tools continued to display Sandy Island for years, perpetuating a subtle confusion. Scholars of cartography point to inertia. Once a place has been drawn, removed, or modified, it may persist in derivative works, its erasure slower than its discovery. This persistence underscores a broader human tendency to maintain the familiar, even in the face of contradictory evidence, a reminder that maps reflect not just geography, but the weight of belief and history. In time, maps became mirrors of human error, reflecting not reality but the confidence of those who dared to chart the unknown. Certain atlases and educational references retained Sandy Island long after surveys disproved its existence, creating a curious contradiction between the physical and conceptual worlds. The phenomenon illuminates how errors gain authority through repetition, and how human culture sometimes values continuity over accuracy. For scientists, educators, and navigators alike, the Phantom Atoll serves as a warning that even in the age of satellites, inherited information can shape understanding as strongly as observation itself. Navigators, scientists, and educators grapple with the lessons Sandy Island offers about trust, evidence, and illusion. It demonstrates how errors, once codified, can acquire the authority of fact, shaping exploration and decision-making long after the original observation has been disproven. The atoll's story intersects with broader questions of human perception, demonstrating that geography is not only a matter of terrain but also of interpretation. Educators use Sandy Island as a case study in critical thinking, illustrating how even trusted data must be questioned, verified, and contextualized to ensure accuracy. In this way, the Phantom Atoll continues to educate, even as it refuses to exist physically. The story of a place that never existed reminds us that the line between reality and representation is thinner than any map can show. Cartographers now treat Sandy Island as a symbol of caution, a cautionary tale of assumptions, repetition, and the limitations of observation. While modern navigation no longer risks a shipwreck on non-existent sand, the island's legend endures in the collective imagination of mariners, geographers, and curious minds. It embodies a paradox, a land that is both everywhere on charts and nowhere in reality, a reminder that some discoveries belong not to the physical world, but to the intricate web of human expectation and storytelling. In places where no land breaks the ocean, the shadow of Sandy endures on every map it once touched. The blurred oil refinery of Hungary's Százhalombatta oil refinery. The hiss of steam and the metallic clang of machinery dominate a place few are allowed to see. At first glance, it might appear to be an ordinary industrial site, yet its presence on maps and satellite imagery has long been shrouded in ambiguity. Satellite services often display a patch of obscured or softened outlines where the refinery stands, making it an anomaly in a world where most infrastructure is easily mapped. The visual distortion transforms a practical modern installation into something eerily secretive, as if the very act of observation is resisted. To those who study the maps closely, the blur is not just a quirk of technology, but a sign that human oversight and intentional concealment intersect here. Százhalombatta rose from the banks of the Danube not merely as a refinery, but as a symbol of Hungary's industrial determination. Constructed in the mid-20th century, it became a cornerstone of the nation's post-war energy strategy. Initially, it processed crude oil to meet domestic demand, reducing reliance on imports and fueling Hungary's rapid industrialization. Its growth mirrored the ambitions of a country striving to balance political alignment with economic modernization during a turbulent era. Workers remember the first furnaces lit in the 1950s, a combination of careful engineering and raw human labour that set the foundation for decades of continuous operation. The refinery's scale, complexity and importance quickly earned it a reputation not only as a critical energy hub, but also as a site whose details were not lightly shared. Maps tell a different story, lines and structures intentionally softened as if the site itself refuses identification. When satellite technology advanced in the 21st century, analysts discovered unusual anomalies, blurred patches, obfuscated edges, and sections that appeared deliberately muted. Some portions of digital mapping platforms provided clear outlines of storage tanks and pipelines, while adjacent areas were rendered indistinct. The effect is subtle yet unmistakable, prompting questions about why such an active, legal, and publicly acknowledged refinery would be partially hidden from digital eyes. Researchers suggest that these modifications may have been initiated for security reasons, balancing transparency with protection of strategic energy infrastructure. Within the fences, each pipeline and storage tank is guarded not only by metal gates, but by strict oversight and bureaucratic vigilance. Employees describe a regimented environment in which access is controlled by passes, security checks and surveillance. Unauthorized drones are forbidden, and even contractors must follow elaborate protocols to work on site. Such measures are not merely precautionary, they reflect the critical nature of the refinery's output. Any disruption could affect the national energy supply, while exposure of certain operational details could compromise safety or reveal proprietary industrial processes. The human presence, vigilant, procedural and disciplined, enforces the secrecy that maps only hint at. Complex chemical reactions occur daily, hidden behind layers of security and secrecy, sustaining an invisible rhythm of production. Crude oil is refined through distillation towers, hydrocrackers, and catalytic units, producing fuel, lubricants, and chemical precursors essential to both domestic use and international export. Each process is monitored with sensors, controls, and redundancies that ensure efficiency while minimizing risk. Despite these technical realities, the general public sees only the smokestacks and steel frameworks, while the intricacies of operation remain inaccessible. To an outsider, the refinery might appear ordinary, yet the blurred imagery hints at a deeper, deliberately hidden complexity that sets this site apart from other industrial facilities. Its history is entwined with Cold War anxieties, where energy security could equate to national defense. During the decades when Europe's political landscape was tense, facilities like Százhalombatta were seen as strategic assets, and their protection extended beyond physical fences to include control over information and perception. Maps could not be allowed to tell the whole story. Blurred images acted as a subtle barrier, reinforcing a culture of operational secrecy. Even after the Cold War ended, these conventions persisted, and the refinery's obscured presence continued to evoke curiosity and unease, signalling that some sites, for reasons both historical and contemporary, are never fully revealed. In the modern era, the refinery remains a hub of industrial activity, yet the digital veil continues to shape perceptions. Analysts, journalists, and curious citizens alike encounter inconsistencies between open-source maps and ground-level observations. Where pipelines stretch, shadows of storage tanks appear, but some sections remain muted or distorted. This tension between clarity and obfuscation mirrors broader questions about technology and governance. How much of what we see is filtered, censored, or shaped by those with authority over critical infrastructure? The refinery exists in a liminal space, at once fully operational and partially concealed, blending transparency with deliberate opacity in ways few other sites do. Beyond the technical and historical, the refinery embodies a broader story about the intersection of human ingenuity, secrecy, and national priorities. Industrial design, operational excellence, and strategic management are layered with protective measures that ensure sensitive information does not fall into unintended hands. Maps, satellites, and even casual observation cannot fully capture the scale, complexity, and nuance of what occurs inside. To understand Svalbard is to recognize that some places are not hidden for sinister reasons alone. They're shielded to protect life, property, and national stability. Yet this very concealment transforms a place of routine industrial labor into a locus of mystery for those who study the world from afar. Even routine inspections and academic studies of industrial sites note the unusual nature of Svalbard's digital footprint. While most refineries worldwide can be observed and catalogued with satellite imagery, this one remains exceptional. Its partially blurred representation has been documented in mapping audits and security assessments, marking it as a case study in controlled visibility. Scholars and engineers debate whether this selective concealment primarily serves safety, proprietary interests, or a legacy of historical caution. Whatever the motive, the effect is undeniable. A refinery that functions in plain sight yet maintains an aura of the forbidden. The refinery story reveals how human systems of secrecy and protection evolve alongside technology. What was once guarded only by fences, guards, and policy is now managed in part through digital manipulation of publicly accessible maps. The choice to obscure certain details speaks to the complex interplay between transparency, risk, and perception. It underscores that even in the age of satellites, drones, and instant communication, some truths remain deliberately out of reach. Svalbard is not a lost island, a vanished atoll, or a remote Arctic blur, yet its secrecy is no less compelling. The mystery is engineered, calculated, and maintained with intention. Alive with hum and glow, the refinery hides countless truths about its operations behind walls the world cannot cross. The US nuclear test island, Amchitka Island. Strategists once mapped Amchitka not for settlement but for control, a remote canvas for testing the most destructive power humanity had created. Situated in the Aleutian chain of Alaska, the island's isolation, harsh climate, and volcanic geology rendered it nearly invisible to everyday maps and far from civilian observation. During the 1960s and 1970s, military planners and scientists selected it as the ideal location for underground nuclear detonations, balancing remoteness with technical feasibility. The island's coordinates appeared on charts, yet details were often minimized or blurred, ensuring the operations remained secret to all but a select few. Even contemporary satellite images hint at only the contours, offering a deceptive simplicity that belies the complexity and danger concealed beneath the surface. Ideal for underground detonations and radioactive containment, the rock formations of its volcanic spine drew the focus of geologists' surveys. Thick basalt and fractured bedrock offered a natural vault for nuclear experiments, theoretically minimizing the risk of surface fallout. Detailed seismic studies preceded any blast, measuring fault lines and underground density to prevent catastrophic breaches. Each layer of rock was examined, analyzed, and logged, producing data that guided both the depth of the explosive devices and the safety protocols for personnel. Scientists understood that one miscalculation could generate an unpredictable earthquake or release radiation beyond intended containment zones, yet the island's geological features remained the best compromise between secrecy and safety. When the first nuclear devices were lowered into tunnels, few outside the project knew the scale of what would follow. Engineers and military officials worked under strict compartmentalization, often never seeing the full picture. Teams specialized in drilling, detonation, monitoring, and environmental assessment, each contributing essential knowledge while remaining unaware of the other components. The island became a hive of controlled activity, with the sound of machinery, echoing hammers, and low hums of sensors marked a rhythm of operations largely invisible to the wider world. For those observing from afar, Amchitka remained an unremarkable patch of land. Yet inside, it was transformed into a meticulously engineered laboratory for forces that could shape the Earth itself. seismic monitors, buried deep in ice and soil, recorded tremors that would never be fully explained to the public. The underground tests produced vibrations detectable thousands of miles away, prompting international curiosity and concern. Despite this, official reports downplayed their magnitude, often classifying details as sensitive military data. Each tremor was logged with precision, each aftershock measured against projected expectations. Scientists documented the interplay between explosive energy and geological response, creating a secret record that would only later emerge in declassified studies. To the public, the island remained silent, but within the bedrock, a complex dialogue of physics and engineering played out unseen. Displaying Amchitka sparsely, maps erased or softened details, a cartographic silence mirroring operational secrecy. Standard atlases and government charts often omitted tunnels, equipment, or even inhabited zones used for temporary personnel. Satellite imagery, now a common tool for observation, historically showed selective blurring or minimal resolution over key areas. The intentional obscuration served multiple purposes, preventing intelligence gathering by adversaries, shielding sensitive environmental data, and maintaining a psychological veil of mystery. Scholars and amateur map analysts noticed inconsistencies over time. The island appeared on a map yet resisted full comprehension, its hidden infrastructure silently marking the boundaries between knowledge and secrecy. Military personnel, scientists, and temporary workers arrived in rotations, leaving the island almost entirely uninhabited afterward. The Aleutian weather dictated brief, intense work periods, and housing facilities were temporary, often disassembled once projects concluded. These short-term residents documented what they could, sometimes in journals or classified reports, yet the majority of their observations remained inaccessible. Supplies were shipped with care, and every movement on the island was catalogued to maintain operational security. The human footprint was fleeting, yet the effects of their work, tunnels, monitoring stations, and underground detonations, endured far longer, leaving an invisible but indelible mark on the island's geology. During the height of Cold War tension, every detonation was calculated to signal power without revealing method, leaving observers guessing. Internationally, Amchitka served as both a laboratory and a statement. While not publicly acknowledged at the time, the tests were closely monitored by global intelligence agencies, whose instruments recorded seismic events and radioactivity levels. Diplomats, scientists, and strategists debated the implications, balancing knowledge of explosions with uncertainty about purpose and scale. Each blast was a carefully choreographed intersection of science, politics, and secrecy, turning the uninhabited island into a stage for events whose meaning was obscured from the broader world. Modern satellite images reveal only the empty contours of the island, yet traces of human intervention linger beneath the surface. Crater formations, altered vegetation patterns, and remnants of temporary structures hint at past activity, but are difficult to interpret without detailed knowledge. Environmental surveys conducted decades later detected subtle radiation signatures and altered soil chemistry, evidence of experiments long concluded yet not entirely forgotten by the land itself. Though Amchitka now appears abandoned, it is layered with history, a record of technological ambition, geopolitical tension, and the persistent challenge of observing what was meant to remain hidden. In the decades since, Amchitka has remained a focus for researchers uncovering subtle clues about the long-term effects of underground detonations. Scientific expeditions in the 2000s and 2010 examined the island for residual radiation, soil composition changes, and minor geological instability. Surveys revealed low but measurable radioactive isotopes in certain areas, confirming the lasting imprint of nuclear tests despite strict containment measures. Marine biologists noted shifts in fish populations and benthic ecosystems near the island's shores, suggesting that the tests may have subtly influenced surrounding waters. These studies highlight the persistence of human impact in extreme environments, offering clues about both environmental resilience and the unforeseen consequences of secret experiments. Each discovery adds a layer of complexity to Amchitka's narrative, showing that the island's hidden story extends far beyond the brief presence of personnel and detonation events. The island's story reveals the intersection of natural extremity, human ambition, and deliberate secrecy. Amchitka was never intended for ordinary life. it exists as a site where the Earth itself became both participant and witness to human experimentation. Maps, reports, and photographs provide only partial glimpses of its history, leaving gaps filled by analysis, speculation, and emerging declassified material. The secrecy surrounding it has become part of its identity, transforming an otherwise remote landmass into a symbol of controlled knowledge and hidden danger. Its legacy persists as both a cautionary tale and an enigmatic presence in the Aleutian archipelago. Seemingly abandoned, the island hides secrets within its rock that still challenge the limits of knowledge. The Hidden Hall of Secrets, Vatican's Secret Archives. Concealed under marble tiles and frescoed arches, the Vatican's hidden labyrinth stretches in a complexity that defies even the most meticulous mapping. Known formally as the Archivum Secretum Vaticanum, the Vatican's Secret Archives stretches over 80 kilometers of shelving, housing documents accumulated over more than a millennium. Despite its official name, secret refers to private papal records, yet the atmosphere feels far more enigmatic than mere bureaucracy. The corridors, narrow and dimly lit, carry the weight of centuries, and the scent of aged parchment and leather bindings seems to seep into every corner, embedding history into the very air. Historians who have gained access describe a space where time itself seems suspended. Thousands of manuscripts, some older than the Renaissance, rest in unmarked boxes, their titles whispered only in catalogues that themselves are closely guarded. Among these are letters penned by Michelangelo during his work on the Sistine Chapel, correspondence between the Vatican and kings of Europe during the tumultuous 16th century, and sensitive records detailing the Church's dealings with emerging scientific discoveries. Maps, registers, and papal bulls are meticulously organised, yet the layout is nearly impossible to navigate without guidance. Each hallway and room carries a subtle weight, as though the walls themselves remember every footstep taken within their confines. Access to the archives is stringently controlled, with only qualified scholars and clerics granted entry under strict supervision. Research requests must often take months or even years to be approved, and once inside, visitors are accompanied by an archivist at all times. Cameras, pens with ink, and even personal notes are restricted, and the slightest misstep can result in immediate removal. The secrecy is such that even today, rumours persist about entire wings of the archives that remain completely unmapped, rooms whose existence is acknowledged only in passing mentions by senior Vatican officials. Some claim these areas contain papal documents so sensitive that their disclosure could alter our understanding of history, law, or theology. Others suggest these hidden chambers are repositories for objects rather than documents, relics, artifacts, or items whose provenance has been deliberately obscured. Among the most fascinating portions of the collection are documents related to the Inquisition, a period that continues to intrigue scholars and conspiracy theorists alike. Trial records and letters reveal the Church's meticulous documentation of heresy and legal proceedings. These papers are not merely dry historical accounts, they are windows into a society grappling with faith, fear, and the boundaries of knowledge. Equally compelling are letters written by explorers, scientists, and political figures seeking favour or guidance from the Vatican, detailing discoveries, crises, and ambitions that have shaped the course of human history. Even financial ledgers show the Church's influence over Europe's economic and political networks, hinting at clandestine connections. It is often said that the archives are less a library than a cathedral of memory, each document a relic of past human intention and curiosity. Rarely seen by the public, some texts have gained notoriety for their mysterious content or rumoured revelations. For instance, scholars have speculated over letters that might illuminate the Vatican's position on scientific revolutions, secret diplomatic negotiations, or lost works of great thinkers. The preservation techniques employed within the archives are equally meticulous, with climate-controlled rooms and careful handling protocols designed to protect fragile manuscripts from decay. Archivists are trained to detect even the slightest signs of deterioration, a vigilance that underscores the value placed on these records and the knowledge they contain. Despite centuries of scholarship and selective access, the Vatican's secret archives have inspired countless theories that verge on the mythical. Writers and researchers have suggested that hidden within these walls are censored documents relating to extraterrestrial contact, prophetic visions, or unsolved historical mysteries. the Vatican itself has occasionally addressed curiosity about its holdings, emphasizing that the secret designation refers to privacy and security, yet the organization's reluctance to fully disclose its contents only fuels the imagination. Scholars report a tactile sense of history pressing against every surface, as if the documents guard secrets beyond their literal words. The architecture of the archive itself reinforces its air of inaccessibility. Hidden behind the Vatican Library and accessible through a series of unmarked corridors and staircases, the archives resemble a fortress as much as a repository. Thick walls, reinforced doors, and controlled entry points ensure that no unauthorized visitor can penetrate its depths. The internal organization appears both logical and arcane. Documents are categorized according to a system refined over centuries, but the sheer volume and diversity of materials make it impossible to appreciate fully without guidance. Even seasoned researchers feel disoriented among endless shelves, as though the archive reshapes to conceal corridors. Among the most extraordinary items reportedly housed within the archives are letters written by figures such as Copernicus, Galileo, and other revolutionary scientists whose discoveries once clashed with religious doctrine. Documents detailing early missions, encounters with new worlds, and correspondences with rulers and statesmen offer glimpses of a Vatican deeply intertwined with global knowledge and power. Some of these texts were thought lost to history until rediscovered within the archive's holdings, their survival owed to careful cataloguing and centuries of careful custodianship. Scholars who have worked with these materials often speak of a profound sense of awe, encountering firsthand the tangible evidence of history's unfolding, hidden from the eyes of ordinary observers for generations. The secrecy surrounding the archives also serves to protect the Church's political and spiritual influence. By limiting access and carefully curating the availability of documents, the Vatican maintains control over narratives that might otherwise be subject to misinterpretation or misuse. Some historians laud limited research access, while others believe vast troves remain underexplored or unknown. This tension between preservation, secrecy, and scholarship enhances the archive's reputation as a place where mystery and history intertwine, where the past exists simultaneously as evidence and enigma, tangible yet almost impenetrable. Even the cataloguing of the Vatican secret archives carries an air of fascination. While modern databases and inventories exist, a significant portion of the collection is still referenced through centuries-old card files and handwritten registers. The archivists who maintain these systems are often scholars themselves, trained not only in history and languages, but in deciphering cryptic notations and abbreviations left by predecessors. Each retrieval of a document becomes a careful orchestration, an interaction between human expertise and the layered history of the collection. For the casual observer, the archives seem a place where time has slowed, and knowledge waits for those privileged to witness it. In recent decades, selective parts of the archive have been made available to researchers working on specific projects, including digitization efforts aimed at preserving the documents for future generations. Yet even as technology offers new ways to explore the collection, large sections remain untouched, their contents unrecorded and unseen. The archive's influence extends beyond its walls. Scholars around the world rely on insights gained from its materials, often reconstructing historical events or resolving long-standing debates through the careful study of letters, decrees, and manuscripts. Yet the heart of the Vatican secret archives remains hidden, guarding the Church's most private records. Visitors who leave the archives often describe a lingering unease, a sensation that the weight of unseen eyes and unspoken stories follows them into the sunlight. The juxtaposition of scholarship and concealed history creates a unique tension where every discovery raises new questions. The air seems to carry whispers of decisions made centuries ago, of policies and judgments that shape the trajectory of nations and faiths, yet remain known to only a select few. In this way, the archives are less a passive storehouse of documents than an active presence, a silent witness to the unfolding drama of human civilization, holding its secrets in a quiet but unyielding grip. For centuries, the Vatican's secret archives have represented both the pinnacle of historical preservation and the apex of human curiosity. Scholars, clerics, and adventurers alike have been drawn to its doors, seeking knowledge, insight, or merely the thrill of standing before the unseen. Each document, each meticulously catalogued manuscript, carries the weight of countless decisions, conflicts, and discoveries, a reminder that history is not merely a record of events, but a living dialogue between past and present. And while the world may glimpse fragments of what lies within, the full extent of the archives remains concealed. A place where history sleeps behind doors that may never be opened. A single step into those shadowed corridors feels as if one might enter a domain where the past itself refuses to be fully known. Poveglia Island, Italy's haunted quarantine island. A thin veil of mist hangs over the Venetian lagoon, curling around wooden poles and the rippling reflections of gondolas. Yet, in its centre, a darker shadow drifts silently across the water. Poveglia Island rises from the murky waves like a relic of forgotten terror, a place that time has touched only to leave decay in its wake. Its jagged outline is rarely marked on maps, and satellite images show only blurred rooftops, as if the island resists being seen. Approaching from the water, the air grows colder, heavier, imbued with the faint scent of algae and salt, mingling with the imagined ghosts of centuries past. The buildings that dot the island are skeletal remains of their former purpose, walls crumbling, windows gaping like hollow eyes, and roofs sagging under the weight of ivy and neglect. Small stone pathways twist unpredictably, sometimes disappearing into marshy undergrowth or descending to the lagoon's edge, where boats once ferried the sick and dying. The quiet is profound, broken only by water, wind, or the occasional bird, seeming to warn intruders. In the late 18th century, Venice faced relentless waves of plague, and Poveglia became a quarantine station to keep contagion from reaching the city. Ferries would arrive silently at the island's docks, carrying those stricken with fever, often chained or guarded to prevent escape. Within the stone buildings, wooden doors creaked shut, enclosing the sick in rooms where sunlight barely penetrated. Contemporary Venetian records note that hundreds perished here, their bodies buried in unmarked graves across the island, and centuries later, archaeological surveys still reveal traces of these resting places beneath layers of overgrowth and sediment. Yet plague was not the island's only story. In the early 20th century, Poveglia transformed into a mental asylum, a place where the line between care and cruelty often blurred. Patients were confined in sparse rooms, sometimes subject to harsh treatments and isolation, and whispers of mistreatment filtered across the lagoon to the mainland. Archival documents indicate that overcrowding was frequent, sanitation was poor, and resources were limited, though some staff reportedly tried to mitigate suffering. Visitors described the asylum as a place where despair became physical, the walls absorbing anguish until it seemed to linger like a fog around the corridors. Today, remnants of padded rooms, rusted beds, and peeling paint bear silent witness to decades of human suffering, their presence as palpable as the shadows that crawl along the floors in fading daylight. The island's geography amplifies its mystique. Situated between the main Venetian islands, it is surrounded by shallow, unpredictable waters and marshes that complicate navigation, providing a natural barrier against casual exploration. Buildings cluster on higher ground, while lower areas have reverted to swamp, visible only to careful study. Satellite photographs, where accessible, often obscure details, and official Italian authorities maintain strict regulations, prohibiting visits to all but a handful of researchers. Legends have grown alongside documented history. Stories abound of spectral figures glimpsed in broken windows, disembodied cries echoing across the lagoon at night, and lights flickering among the ruins with no discernible source. Local fishermen speak in hushed tones of strange sensations while passing the island, an oppressive chill, the feeling of being watched, a sudden silence that falls without warning. Some tales are rooted in fact. Caretakers did report hearing the sound of footsteps when no one was present, and reports exist of patients who died in isolation, their final moments unrecorded. Others are entirely folkloric, yet they persist because the island's combination of real suffering and secrecy makes it a magnet for imagination. Despite its eerie reputation, Poveglia offers tangible insights into the past. Quarantine records show meticulous attempts to control disease, with separate wings for those at different stages of illness and ventilation systems designed to minimize airborne contagion. The strategic placement within the lagoon allowed authorities to monitor arrivals and departures, reflecting a calculated effort to isolate disease while maintaining Venice's safety. Similarly, Asylum logs, fragmentary though they are, provide glimpses into the operation of early psychiatric care in Italy, revealing both the humanity and cruelty of those entrusted with vulnerable lives. Each detail, no matter how small, contributes to the island's layered history, a mixture of official records, human tragedy and unspoken memories. Exploration of Poveglia, even in the modern era, is perilous and limited. Urban adventurers risk arrest for setting foot on its shores, while researchers must navigate bureaucratic and logistical obstacles to study its ruins. Yet those few who have ventured there describe an atmosphere unlike any other, where decay, silence and history converge into a palpable presence. Corridors feel alive with echoes of the past. Courtyards seem to retain the heat of fevered bodies. Staircases bear the memory of hurried or faltering steps. Even the air seems charged, heavy with centuries of containment, illness and despair, as if the island itself remembers every moment that unfolded upon it. Overgrown vegetation has begun reclaiming the quarantine buildings and asylum wards, transforming decay into a strange natural theatre. Vines curl around crumbling masonry, reeds grow through stone floors, and moss carpets long forgotten courtyards. While this reclamation gives the island an eerie beauty, it also conceals evidence, hiding architectural details, burial sites, and remnants of past human activity. Satellite imagery offers only fragmented glimpses, reinforcing the notion that Poveglia exists partly beyond view, a place that resists full comprehension, where maps and records can suggest form but never convey the weight of presence that defines it. Approached from Venice, under the glare of daylight, the island exudes an unsettling presence. Its silhouette against the water is angular and irregular. Buildings appear as fragmented shadows, and the whisper of wind through ruined structures evokes a sense of history pressing upon the present. The human imagination, already primed by tales of plague, asylum, and lingering spirits, finds ample fuel in the island's appearance. Scholars and storytellers alike are drawn to Poveglia, compelled to piece together its narrative from scraps of archival material, oral accounts, and direct observation of the ruins, yet even the most meticulous reconstructions leave gaps, unknown corridors, and spaces that may never be entered. Ultimately, Poveglia Island is a liminal space, suspended between the living world and a past defined by fear, suffering, and isolation. Its omission from maps, blurred satellite images, and restricted access reinforce this in-between quality, while its tangible remnants offer haunting proof of the lives once contained there. The decay of buildings, the whispers of the lagoon, and the lingering weight of human tragedy combine to make the island not merely a historical site but a presence, a place that continues to evoke awe, curiosity and unease in equal measure. Glistening under the Venetian sun, the lagoon conceals Poveglia, which waits in silence, daring those who approach to uncover its secrets. Punggye-ri Nuclear Test Site, North Korea. Even from the edges of satellite images, Punggye-ri appears almost unreal, a series of jagged mountains in the desolate North Korean northeast that conceal what the world can scarcely confirm. The site itself is not marked on most maps, its entrances camouflaged against the rocky slopes, and public imagery intentionally blurred or obscured. Analysts rely on patchwork sources, seismic activity reports, rare official statements, and occasional leaks to piece together a picture of the underground labyrinth beneath Mount Mantap. The landscape above is harsh and unyielding, with steep ridges and deep valleys that naturally shield the hidden tunnels, as if the earth itself were complicit in guarding whatever lies beneath. Within the mountain, the scale of the Punggye-ri complex is staggering yet largely unknown. Experts believe multiple tunnels extend kilometers into the rock, constructed to contain the immense energy of nuclear detonations. Reports suggest ventilation shafts, blast chambers, and monitoring stations are interconnected to isolate tests, though the layout remains a mystery. Satellite photographs, when not deliberately blurred, reveal faint traces of roadways and cleared areas, but these hints are enigmatic, offering only partial glimpses of what is otherwise a carefully concealed operation. Seismic readings have become a window into the forbidden, a means for the outside world to infer events invisible to human eyes. When the Earth trembles beneath Mount Mantap, international monitoring stations record spikes that correspond with underground detonations, each pulse of energy interpreted and debated by scientists around the world. From these tremors, analysts estimate the yield of the tests, the depth of tunnels, and even the potential structural reinforcement of the chambers. Yet such data is inherently limited. It can hint at magnitude, but cannot map the corridors, chambers, or precise engineering choices that lie behind the mountain's facade. Camouflage and subterfuge extend even to the approaches that lead to the complex. From an aerial perspective, dirt roads are minimized or redirected to avoid revealing traffic patterns, while tree lines and natural contours hide entrance points. Construction materials are often stockpiled in areas deliberately chosen to blend with the terrain, and vehicles ferrying equipment or personnel appear as fleeting shapes in occasional imagery. Analysts have pieced together likely entry points and staging areas, yet no verification is possible without direct access, which is strictly forbidden. The human element is a shadow behind the secrecy, hinted at only indirectly through defector testimonies and rare state broadcasts. Workers, engineers, and military personnel who maintain the tunnels are reported to operate under intense control, monitored and restricted even within the compound. Conditions are described as austere, with the constant imperative of safety and secrecy paramount, yet the precise daily realities are unknown. Occasionally, reports surface of accidents, collapses, or evacuations during tests, though details are fragmentary and unverified, leaving the mind to fill in the unknown with speculation. Geopolitics and the threat of catastrophe amplify the tension surrounding Poveglia. Each detected explosion sends shockwaves far beyond the mountains themselves, triggering international sanctions, emergency diplomatic meetings, and strategic recalculations. The site's concealed nature magnifies these effects, as the inability to verify the inner workings leaves analysts to contend with a combination of fact, inference, and cautious conjecture. Satellite imagery may suggest expansion or excavation. Seismic reports may hint at new tunnels, yet certainty is impossible. Natural geography reinforces secrecy as much as human design. The mountainous terrain, often cloaked in snow or mist, is difficult to traverse and even harder to observe closely. Valleys funnel movement predictably, allowing for surveillance and control, while cliffs and ridges shield hidden entrances from view. During winter, frozen surfaces and harsh winds further obscure observation, creating conditions where even the most determined satellite imagery struggles to penetrate the veil. To casual observers, Poveglia seems empty, yet beneath lies a vast network capable of reshaping geopolitical calculations. Technical ingenuity has long been inferred from the site's outputs. Each underground test requires precision engineering. Tunnels must absorb the force of massive detonations, prevent collapse, and minimize detectable radiation leakage. Observers outside the country rely on the patterns of tremors, subsequent environmental readings, and historical test yields to model the tunnel's construction. These analyses suggest that Poveglia combines natural rock strength with careful design, using cross tunnels, blast chambers, and pressure control systems to contain energy that could otherwise devastate the mountain itself. Legends of concealment extend beyond the technical, touching almost on the mythical. Reports circulated internationally hint at tunnels stretching beyond known ranges, hidden chambers, and emergency escape routes whose existence is neither confirmed nor denied. The site is a shadow in the public imagination, where every faint trace captured by satellite becomes fodder for speculation, and every tremor in the mountains is interpreted as a fragment of a story that cannot be fully told. Even highly classified intelligence, when disclosed, leaves gaps, creating a narrative that combines real-world danger with a sense of unknowable mystery. Few images exist that give a sense of scale, and those that do are often deliberately obscured. Roadways appear patchy, buildings seem indistinct, and equipment stockpiles are reduced to blurred clusters. Analysts compensate with comparative studies, cross-referencing construction patterns and regional geography to hypothesize tunnel networks and testing areas. The sense of incompleteness fuels fascination. Each partial observation implies a whole that is vast, dangerous, and beyond verification, a territory where knowledge itself is restricted by the physical and political constraints imposed from within. Despite decades of scrutiny, the Poveglia nuclear test site remains an enigma. Each new report, whether seismic, photographic, or anecdotal, adds only incremental clarity, leaving the broader picture as elusive as ever. The mountains stand indifferent, silently containing the network of tunnels, chambers, and human labour, while governments, scientists, and observers debate possibilities and measure tremors in the hope of understanding what the site truly holds. It is a place where reality and speculation converge, and the unknown looms as large as the mountains. No human map, no satellite lens can reveal the full truth buried beneath those jagged peaks. The enigmatic Iraqi ruins of Babylon. Once the jewel of Mesopotamia, Babylon now sprawls as fragmented stone and dust, a place where the glory of ancient kings lingers only in echoes and whispered records. The Euphrates winds nearby, its waters once flowing through the city's ceremonial canals, yet today the river traces a path that barely hints at the intricate hydraulic systems that sustained this metropolis. Travellers of centuries past wrote of massive walls, grand gates and towering ziggurats that seem to pierce the sky. Modern visitors see only a scattering of foundations, partially reclaimed by desert sands and agricultural encroachment, fragments of a city whose full plan remains indecipherable. Maps, both historical and contemporary, fail to convey the layers of construction, destruction, and reconstruction that have occurred here over millennia. Amid the scattered remnants of ziggurats and walls, faint traces of city planning hint at the brilliance long vanished, yet much is obscured by time and human intervention. Archaeologists have noted the outlines of streets, temples, and palaces beneath the rubble, with sun-baked bricks still bearing the stamped marks of rulers who sought to imprint their authority on every surface. Excavations reveal a palimpsest of eras. Foundations of Hammurabi's walls lie beneath the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palaces, and even smaller civic structures are layered with traces of successive empires. These discoveries evoke awe and unease alike, for every revelation also exposes what is missing, a void of knowledge created by centuries of looting, natural erosion, and the relentless march of history. Historical records suggest layers of construction and destruction, yet much has been erased by conflict and neglect. Alexander the Great's brief occupation, Persian invasions, Mongol incursions, and Ottoman administration all left their marks, often by dismantling or repurposing earlier structures. In the 20th century, archaeological expeditions, both Iraqi and international, faced the added challenge of political instability, war, and sanctions that restricted research and access. Maps drawn during these periods are inconsistent, sometimes omitting key features, sometimes overlaying modern roads on ancient ruins. The city, once meticulously planned, has become an enigma, where historical knowledge and physical evidence exist in tension, each obscuring as much as it reveals. Modern satellite imagery offers tantalizing glimpses, yet large areas remain indistinct or deliberately obscured. Some sites are pixelated, and certain regions appear blank or blurred, reflecting both security concerns and practical limitations. Analysts track the shifting patterns of excavation and construction, noting where reconstruction efforts have unearthed foundations, yet even high-resolution images cannot penetrate the soil layers that hold the most secrets. Geospatial reconstructions attempt to model the city's original layout, but each hypothesis is provisional, as many of the tunnels, chambers, and ceremonial platforms remain buried beneath centuries of accumulated sand and debris. Babylon exists simultaneously as a place of measured study and of deliberate uncertainty. Legends of the Hanging Gardens and the Tower of Babel cast a shadow over every excavation, entwining imagination with fact. Herodotus and later historians wrote of terraces irrigated by ingenious waterworks, while biblical narratives immortalize the tower as an emblem of human ambition and divine intervention. Archaeologists have debated the location, construction techniques, and even the existence of the gardens themselves, relying on fragmentary evidence and textual interpretation. These myths enhance the city's mystery, for the ruins cannot confirm or deny the splendor once claimed. The absence of certainty becomes part of Babylon's enduring allure, inviting speculation that spans centuries and cultures. Military zones and reconstruction projects complicate the ruins' visibility, blending preservation with secrecy. Portions of the site were cordoned off during the Gulf War and subsequent conflicts, leaving areas unexcavated or poorly documented. Protective measures, intended to preserve fragile structures, also obscure the ruins from casual observation and digital mapping platforms. Local and international agencies occasionally restrict photography or publication of precise coordinates, citing both security and conservation concerns. This layer of modern concealment mirrors the historical gaps created by conquest and neglect. reinforcing the sense that the city has long resisted full understanding, whether by enemy forces, archaeologists, or mapmakers. Local narratives speak of echoes in the bricks, voices of a civilization both immense and fleeting. Farmers and villagers recount fragments of oral history, describing buried chambers, hidden inscriptions and tunnels said to connect palaces to temples in ways that official records do not confirm. Even among trained archaeologists, these accounts are approached with caution, yet they hint at human interactions with the city that extend beyond the formal record. Walking the ruins today, one senses the weight of memory in the uneven stones, the subtle inclinations of foundations, and the faint outlines of walls whose purpose is lost to time. These sensory traces create a lingering presence, suggesting that Babylon continues to exert influence over those who study it, see it, or merely imagine it. Even centuries of scholarship cannot fully reconcile the city that was with the ruins that endure. Every excavation uncovers new fragments, yet raises more questions. Every ancient tablet hints at administrative sophistication that no single map can capture, and every reconstruction effort risks imposing modern assumptions on a world long vanished. The ruins themselves seem to resist full interpretation, inviting awe, frustration, and curiosity in equal measure. For all the technology, analysis, and historical record, Babylon retains a tension between the known and the unknowable, a space where the mind confronts the limits of both archaeology and imagination. Layers of sand, stone, and memory converge to make Babylon a city of partial truths and persistent wonder. The combination of ancient engineering, repeated destruction, mythological resonance, and modern restrictions produces a tableau that is both factual and fantastical. Visitors, researchers, and observers alike encounter a landscape where concrete details, the precise dimensions of walls, the locations of temples, the traces of canals, exist side by side with conjecture, legend, and mystery. In this sense, the ruins themselves are a mirror of human history, grand, flawed, incomplete, and always subject to interpretation. Time has left Babylon fractured yet unyielding, a city that cannot be fully captured by maps, photographs, or written accounts. The Euphrates continues its course nearby, indifferent to empires and excavations alike, while ziggurats rise faintly from the sands as reminders of ambition, devotion, and power. Scholars debate, drones hover above restricted areas, and travellers glimpse stones that were once the foundations of temples dedicated to gods whose names have largely faded. Even as understanding grows in fits and starts, the city refuses to yield its full truth, holding secrets in its layers of clay, brick, and legend. Centuries of excavation cannot uncover all that Babylon has buried. The covert Chinese nuclear town, Factory 404, Gansu. Trucks rumble along concealed roads in Factory 404, the secretive nuclear town in Gansu, China, carrying equipment whose purpose is carefully hidden from the outside world, their paths obscured by the jagged terrain and deliberate camouflage. Fences and checkpoints interrupt every approach, guarded by personnel whose presence is routine yet imperious, as if the very ground beneath them has been designated sacred and untouchable. Shadows of warehouses stretch across barren courtyards, revealing only faint glimpses of industrial machinery, while plumes of smoke or steam curl from buildings in patterns meant to mislead casual observers. The activity is constant, precise, and methodical, yet for those watching from afar, it suggests more than production. It hints at a rhythm dictated by secrecy itself. Even the faintest glimpse from above reveals only hints of order, as if the town itself refuses to be fully seen. Satellite imagery, when it is available, shows grids of roads, clusters of uniform buildings, and sprawling compounds, yet key areas are blurred or missing entirely. Experts can detect the alignment of certain structures and speculate on storage facilities or power plants, but the majority of the complex remains unknowable. The edges of the town seem to dissolve into the surrounding mountains and desert plains, as though the very landscape has conspired to hide what human hands have built, leaving only fragments for analysts to piece together. A labyrinth of tunnels and reinforced chambers lies beneath the surface, built to contain both activity and scrutiny, or so experts suspect. Reports from defectors and historical analyses suggest that some production occurs underground, protected by thick concrete, earth cover, and engineering designed to prevent accidental detection. Ventilation shafts, hidden entrances and blast-resistant doors indicate an infrastructure that prioritizes secrecy as much as functionality. The town's subterranean systems are not mapped on any public record, and the limited accounts that exist provide only tantalizing hints of a network extensive enough to sustain operations invisible to conventional monitoring. In every detail, even the utilities seem intended to hide rather than expose their purpose. Water and power systems in Factory 404 are rumoured to operate on an independent grid, with pipelines and cables routed through hidden corridors and subterranean channels to prevent easy mapping. Observers note that the town's energy consumption fluctuates in patterns that suggest complex industrial cycles, possibly for nuclear enrichment or material processing. Communication lines are likely encrypted and isolated, making any external monitoring nearly impossible. Even mundane facilities such as workshops and storage warehouses are believed to incorporate reinforced structures and camouflage to obscure their purpose. These unseen networks hint at a town engineered not only for production, but for deliberate invisibility, where every system is a component of secrecy itself. Life inside is regimented, each worker's path tightly monitored, each task compartmentalized to preserve secrecy. Residents live in self-contained housing blocks, with communal areas, medical facilities and mess halls arranged to minimize contact between different functional units. Access to information is strictly controlled. Even routine knowledge of the town's operations is compartmentalized so that no single individual understands the full picture. Defectors have described strict schedules, uniform oversight, and the omnipresence of surveillance that ensures each day's work proceeds without deviation. The human presence, though essential, is itself hidden, existing almost as a ghostly apparatus within the mechanical and structural framework of the town. Censored and altered, the maps reveal only fragments of the town's true layout, forcing observers to rely on inference and imagination. Historical cartography often omitted Factory 404 entirely, while modern digital platforms obscure boundaries or apply pixelation to sensitive zones. Roads that lead to industrial areas vanish into white or grey smudges, and open-source images provide only partial views of structures. Analysts trace infrastructure by shadows, vehicle patterns, and the orientation of buildings, attempting to reconstruct the hidden city from what little evidence can be observed. The town becomes a puzzle composed of deliberate absence, a place defined as much by what cannot be seen as by what exists in plain view. Construction records, pieced together from partial disclosures, show decades of meticulous planning aimed at atomic production. Archives, memoirs, and sporadic reports indicate that the town was purpose-built to support China's nuclear ambitions, with facilities designed for uranium enrichment, assembly, and testing preparation. Every building was constructed with both functionality and concealment in mind, and expansions occurred in secret over the years to ensure operational continuity without detection. Even today, the timelines of development are reconstructed only from scattered data, making the town as much a historical mystery as a contemporary enigma. Analysts and researchers attempt to reconstruct the complex from scattered clues, yet every theory is shadowed by uncertainty. Seismic anomalies, patterns of electrical consumption, and environmental readings are combined with satellite analysis to produce tentative maps of Factory 404's inner workings. Yet the town's true scale and the precise nature of its facilities remain unknown, and every new report seems to raise more questions than it answers. From afar, the town appears deceptively simple, a collection of geometric shapes and routine activity. In reality, it is a carefully orchestrated system of secrecy, engineering, and human control that defies complete observation. Speculated about by the outside world, the town endures, a place where human ingenuity and secrecy intertwine almost seamlessly. Mountains and desert buffer its boundaries, providing natural concealment, while government protocols ensure that the town's secrets remain intact. It functions as both a symbol of technological ambition and a reminder of the lengths nations go to protect their most sensitive operations. Factory 404 exists simultaneously in reality and in the realm of speculation, a hidden organism whose heartbeat can only be inferred, not observed, and whose full story may never be told. The machinery hums, the lights glow, and the town continues to operate in silence that is absolute to outsiders. The Isle of Britain's restricted military range Foulness Island. Tidal currents carve the island's edges, leaving mudflats that shift with every season and render its perimeter almost unrecognisable from above. The ebb and flow of water reveal and conceal stretches of sand and marsh in an endless cyclical rhythm, as if the island itself is breathing, reshaping its contours to hide what lies inland. From afar, the landscape seems desolate, yet traces hint at roads, platforms and mounds suggesting human activity. The isolation is absolute, and the island's mutable geography becomes a natural cloak for activities that cannot be witnessed by outsiders. Seasonal tides reshape the island in dramatic ways, flooding previously dry mudflats and revealing channels that vanish as quickly as they appear. Migratory birds traverse the marshes, their paths intersecting with hidden roads and abandoned platforms, creating ephemeral trails that disappear with the next high tide. The wind carries the salt of the North Sea inland, eroding paths, rusting metal, and masking the sound of distant machinery, as if nature itself conspires to conceal the island's purpose. Every storm brings subtle changes to the terrain, forcing constant adaptation by those who must traverse its shifting surface. Concrete bunkers and testing platforms punctuate the marshes, their purpose obscured by overgrown reeds and reinforced walls. Long, flat runways and fenced compounds appear intermittently, yet their design is enigmatic. Some structures are heavily fortified, while others are skeletal frameworks, suggesting either temporary usage or deliberate misdirection. Observation towers rise like sentinels from the mud, often painted in neutral tones that blend with the horizon, their windows dark and uninviting. Some platforms appear weathered and abandoned, yet closer inspection hints at recent maintenance, suggesting that what seems deserted may still conceal ongoing operations. Personnel move in strict rotation, each zone patrolled and monitored, the rhythm of activity known only to those inside. Vehicles traverse gravel paths at precise intervals, their movement calculated to avoid exposure, and small boats navigate tidal channels, ferrying personnel and materials under supervision. Workers follow protocols that prioritize safety, secrecy, and efficiency, rarely lingering in open areas. Communication is discreet, often via radio channels or encrypted lines that leave no trace for outside observers. Every step from delivery to deployment is orchestrated, suggesting a place where human presence is both indispensable and intentionally invisible. Bunkers and observation posts vary in size and function, some constructed from reinforced concrete to withstand accidental detonations, others disguised beneath mounds of earth or vegetation. Runways and test platforms are aligned with precision, their geometry suggesting careful planning for ordnance deployment and recovery. Some structures appear abandoned or partially deconstructed, yet careful inspection hints at continued use, possibly for training or temporary exercises. Even temporary facilities are fortified and monitored, revealing an almost obsessive attention to security that extends beyond human observation into the very architecture itself. The careful positioning of these structures across a shifting marshland demonstrates the military's intimate understanding of both geography and operational secrecy. Historical records trace decades of ordnance trials, coastal defence experiments, and strategic adaptation to a landscape both harsh and mutable. Military use of the island dates back to the early 20th century, when it was employed for artillery testing and coastal fortification experiments. Over the years, technologies evolved, and the island hosted trials for missiles, bombs, and experimental munitions. Documents reveal patterns of construction, expansion, and restriction that reflect both military innovation and a cautious respect for the treacherous environment. Layers of sand, silt, and human engineering make precise mapping difficult, reflecting decades of clandestine development. Satellite imagery, when available, reveals only patchy outlines, as if the island itself has been selectively erased from observation. Key zones are blurred or deliberately pixelated, leaving only fragmented glimpses of structures and pathways. Analysts attempt to reconstruct layouts based on shadows, terrain features, and tidal shifts, yet much remains speculative. Each aerial view invites questions about what is hidden beneath the mud, marsh, and reinforced concrete, and how long these secrets have persisted undisturbed. Even high-resolution reconnaissance yields more questions than answers, underscoring the island's intractable opacity. Modern Ministry of Defence operations maintain strict secrecy, with cordoned-off areas and ongoing risk assessments for both land and water hazards. Unexploded ordnance, controlled demolitions, and tidal flooding make large swaths of the island permanently inaccessible. Personnel adhere to rigid protocols, from daily routines to specialized training exercises, minimizing the potential for accidents and observation. Scientific monitoring and environmental assessments coexist with military activity, creating a paradoxical space where safety, secrecy, and experimentation are inseparable. Even local knowledge is filtered through official channels, ensuring the island's aura of enigma remains intact. At dusk, the wind sweeps across the marshes, carrying the scent of salt and mud, and the island's isolation becomes palpable, hinting at activities hidden beneath the horizon. The mudflats reflect the fading light in patterns that shift with the tide, creating illusions of movement or depth where none exist. Small buildings appear as silhouettes, and the hum of distant machinery, faint yet persistent, suggests that life and work continue despite the lack of visible evidence. The combination of natural camouflage, controlled access, and ongoing operational activity produces an island that is both real and unknowable, a site where geography and secrecy intertwine to resist comprehension. Foulness Island exists at the intersection of landscape and human engineering, its marshes and mudflats concealing decades of military purpose and careful planning. The ebbing tide becomes a veil, the reinforced structures remain partially unreadable, and the pathways of those who live and work there are known only to themselves. Each new observation, each satellite pass, and each historical record adds fragments to the picture, but the whole remains elusive. It is a place where natural elements and human strategy combine to maintain an enduring barrier between the island and the outside world, a barrier as physical as it is conceptual. Revealed gradually as the tides retreat, the hidden island of Foulness remains a labyrinth of mud, steel, and secrecy, its full scale and operations understood only by those who have walked its shifting terrain. The blotted-out dam in South Carolina, Koe Dam. The Koe Dam stretches across the Saluda River in South Carolina, its massive concrete form standing as both a feat of engineering and a barrier to outside scrutiny. The water behind it rises in a vast reservoir, still and reflective, yet charged with an almost imperceptible energy, as if holding secrets beneath its glassy surface. Turbines hum silently within, channeling the river's force into electricity that powers communities and industrial sites alike. Yet the true scale of what the dam controls is hidden from casual observers. From the air, its outline is blurred and fragmented, sections deliberately obscured or reduced in resolution on public maps and satellite images, leaving only fragments of its complex geometry open to interpretation. Shifts in water level conceal gates, spillways, and access points, as if the dam camouflages itself. From above, the reservoir stretches into the surrounding landscape, its calm waters masking a labyrinth of control systems and restricted zones. Satellite passes show smudges and pixelation where sensitive facilities lie, and engineers' roads vanish beneath the waterline or curve unexpectedly through dense forest, thwarting direct observation. Bridges, service platforms, and observation towers exist, but their arrangement suggests functionality designed for insiders. For the rest of the world, the dam is merely a silhouette in the landscape, a monument to both human ingenuity and deliberate invisibility. Cartographers must rely on diagrams and fragmented reports, producing an incomplete picture. Personnel at Koe Dam operate under strict schedules and protocols, each movement measured and synchronized to maintain security and efficiency. Maintenance crews navigate narrow catwalks and turbine corridors with a precision born of routine and regulation, while security officers patrol the perimeter with eyes trained to detect both anomalies and intrusion. Boats glide quietly along the reservoir, ferrying essential personnel and equipment to isolated points where infrastructure requires attention, all under the watchful eye of monitoring stations that ensure neither hazard nor observer goes unnoticed. Even mundane activities follow strict protocols, with every step monitored and recorded. Construction logs and engineering records hint at a convergence of civil and classified engineering, documenting innovations that blend hydroelectric technology with nuclear-era safeguards. Koe Dam is part of a wider network tied historically to energy research, including nuclear production and regional strategic planning during the mid-20th century. Though public information focuses on electricity generation and flood control, subtle references suggest the dam played a role in managing water, for sensitive operations nearby, linking infrastructure and secrecy in ways that remain partially undocumented. The concrete is reinforced to endure extraordinary pressures, hinting at a dual purpose. The interplay between water, concrete and electricity creates an environment both mesmerizing and forbidding. Massive spillways release torrents in controlled bursts, their roar a reminder of nature's power harnessed for human ends, while the turbines within convert raw flow into energy with silent efficiency. Monitoring equipment hums constantly, tracking levels, pressures and structural integrity, feeding data into systems both public and classified. Environmental engineers study the reservoir's ecology, noting the effects of fluctuating water levels on fish populations, wetland areas, and seasonal sedimentation. Alongside these functions, operational secrecy ensures the dam's influence extends beyond its physical form. Historical context deepens the sense of concealed importance. Koe Dam was constructed in the early 1970s, part of the Tennessee Valley Authority and regional hydroelectric initiatives, yet certain records reveal links to nuclear production water management. Engineers and planners integrated safety redundancies, reinforced channels, and remote monitoring long before digital surveillance became common, reflecting an anticipation of both natural and human threats. The surrounding landscape was altered deliberately. Access roads, worker housing, and support infrastructure were positioned to maximize functionality while minimizing exposure to public view. Strategic planning shows how secrecy and engineering merged, making the facility's full scope nearly impossible to reconstruct. The dam's appearance in public imagery is selective and misleading. Satellite passes blur turbines, gates, and control buildings. Google Maps and other services often omit parts of the reservoir, creating rectangles of missing data where the dam's complexity might be revealed. Analysts and energy historians attempt to infer the facility's internal layout from limited photographs, topographical maps, and official reports, yet the work is inherently speculative. What seems straightforward, a concrete wall and a reservoir, is in reality a tangle of channels, holding basins, and concealed conduits, each designed to fulfill both functional and protective roles. Modern operations continue under layers of federal oversight, environmental monitoring, and active security. Unexploded ordnance is not a concern here, as with military ranges, but hazards persist in the form of high-voltage systems, rotating machinery, and dammed water capable of sudden release. Access remains tightly restricted. Tours are rare, and workers must pass security clearance to navigate even small portions of the site. Monitoring systems track conditions and personnel, protecting both safety and secrecy. For those outside, these measures render Koe Dam a structure of both fascination and frustration. The more one studies it, the more it conceals. At dusk, the reservoir reflects the fading sunlight, casting long shadows across spillways and service platforms, and the dam itself assumes the air of a silent sentinel. The hum of turbines continues beneath the surface, a barely audible pulse of energy and motion that hints at the unseen work carried out within. Fences and water hide zones, and the network of corridors, gates, and control rooms beneath. Even the most careful observer, whether historian, engineer, or satellite analyst, encounters a partial truth, a structure whose function is legible only in fragments, and whose secrets are held in layers both concrete and conceptual. Standing over the river, Koe Dam embodies a paradox. A concrete wall both functional and impenetrable, controlling waters whose power belies its unassuming appearance. Its waters and machinery shape both landscape and energy grids, yet much of its activity remains intentionally obscured. Every spillway, turbine, and reservoir depth contributes to a hidden story, a narrative of human ingenuity intertwined with secrecy, federal oversight, and engineering mastery. Even decades of study reveal only fragments of the facility's scale, complexity, and purpose. The waters and walls of Koe hide more than energy and engineering. They guard the quiet pulse of operations and intentions that remain invisible to the world outside. The disappearing nuclear island of France, Moruroa Atoll. In the heart of the Pacific, a string of reefs rises briefly above the water, yet Moruroa Atoll appears as if it were fading from both maps and memory. From a distance, it is little more than a low, jagged outline against the ocean, a phantom emerging from the endless blue. Satellite imagery often blurs portions of the island, and maps leave large swaths intentionally vague, creating rectangles of missing information that hint at deliberate concealment. The atoll's very shape has changed over decades of human intervention. Explosions beneath its surface have hollowed it, leaving craters and subsidence that make its perimeter unreliable and ever-shifting. To those studying the Pacific from afar, it seems simultaneously present and absent, a paradox of geography and secrecy that no photograph or chart fully resolves. Decades of detonations have hollowed the land, leaving scars visible from the air and yet deliberately obscured in satellite imagery. The French government conducted its first tests here in 1966, beginning with atmospheric explosions that sent mushroom clouds rising above coral atolls and into the horizon. By the 1970s, the testing shifted underground to minimize international scrutiny and reduce radioactive fallout over inhabited areas. Each blast reshaped the land. Enormous cavities formed beneath the surface, shifting water tables and destabilizing the fragile coral foundations. Craters filled with seawater, giving parts of the atoll the appearance of disappearing entirely into the ocean, while mounds of debris and reinforced concrete disguised entrances and containment chambers. Even today, portions of the island appear ghostly, their true contours erased by both human engineering and natural erosion. Bunkers and observation platforms dot the atoll, their purposes partially documented, yet some vanish entirely beneath mounds of coral and concrete. Reinforced structures once used to house monitoring equipment and personnel remain scattered across the island, some abandoned, others still maintained for ongoing oversight. Long narrow pathways connect fortified observation posts to testing zones, yet these roads are submerged at high tide or obscured by sand and vegetation, preventing casual mapping. Small control towers, painted in muted tones, rise like sentinels from the atoll's surface, yet their windows are often darkened or shuttered, leaving only speculation about the instruments inside. Even the patterns of human activity are deliberately irregular, creating the impression that the atoll is less inhabited than it truly is. Geological surveys reveal a fragile balance between ocean, rock, and man-made cavities, a tension maintained through careful monitoring and selective secrecy. French engineers have installed a network of sensors, some visible, others subterranean, to track subsidence, water infiltration, and the stability of former test sites. Tidal shifts exacerbate the challenges of maintaining these readings, and coral reef growth further complicates mapping and structural observation. Researchers note that some underground chambers show signs of microcollapse, while above, sand and coral formations shift unpredictably, erasing evidence of prior activity. The island's geology, combined with decades of detonation, creates a landscape both unstable and deliberately obscured, a place where natural forces and human intervention intertwine to preserve secrecy. French military patrols navigate the atoll with exacting routines, ensuring that only authorized personnel witness the ongoing, if limited, activity. Small vessels circle the lagoon, ferrying engineers, scientists, and security officers to isolated sectors where monitoring or maintenance is required. Access points are guarded by reinforced gates and surveillance, and entry is strictly controlled. Even minor infractions are reported immediately, emphasizing that the island is off-limits to the public. Observation towers and patrol routes are carefully designed to provide maximum coverage with minimal personnel, reflecting both the harsh environmental conditions and the necessity of secrecy. Visitors are extremely rare, and even scientific teams operate under strict oversight, with maps, photographs, and coordinates tightly regulated. International observers rely on seismic data and sporadic leaks, yet each report offers only fragments of a story whose full scale remains inaccessible. Monitoring agencies track tremors corresponding to underground tests, and occasional whistleblowers or declassified documents hint at the nature and yield of past detonations. Environmental studies, sometimes released under restricted conditions, provide partial insight into radiation levels and ecological impacts, yet gaps in the data leave lingering questions. For decades, scientists and journalists alike have attempted to reconstruct the atoll's layout and history from satellite images, naval records, and first-hand accounts, but each source presents contradictions, emphasizing the difficulty of comprehending a place designed to resist understanding. The environmental consequences of decades of testing are profound, visible in both coral damage and subtle radiation traces. Some coral reefs surrounding Moruroa have been pulverized, or permanently altered by shock waves, while sediment and water samples continue to reveal isotopes deposited long ago. Yet marine life has returned in unexpected ways, with certain species adapting to conditions that remain hazardous to humans. Above water, the atoll is barren and windswept, punctuated only by crumbling bunkers and observation posts that attest to human ambition and oversight. Even routine storms rearrange sand, debris and vegetation, erasing traces of human presence, as if nature itself conspires to protect the island's secrets. As the sun dips below the horizon, the atoll seems to shrink, a phantom of land and power disappearing beneath waves that carry both radiation and secrecy. The water shimmers with reflected light, concealing craters and collapsed tunnels, while the faint outlines of structures and roads emerge only intermittently, revealing glimpses of a network designed for observation, control, and containment. Clouds drift across the sky, momentarily casting shadows that obscure or exaggerate the atoll's size. And even from nearby islands, Moruroa appears unreliable, a fragment of land subject to erasure by tides, storms, or human design. Its presence is a reminder that not all islands exist entirely in the open, and some are designed to vanish from perception as much as from maps. Moruroa Atoll is a place where geography, human engineering, and secrecy converge into a landscape that defies ordinary comprehension. Maps cannot fully capture their shifting contours, satellite images omit critical zones, and the scars of nuclear testing both reveal and conceal the island's history. The atoll exists in multiple layers of reality: the visible surface, the concealed infrastructure, and the deep hollowed chambers beneath, all subject to the ebb and flow of natural and human forces. Attempts to observe, document, or even theorize about the site are inevitably incomplete, leaving the imagination to fill in gaps with speculation, fear, and awe. Though the island fades from maps and memory, it seems to watch in silence, its hollowed scars and secret bunkers holding truths the world is never meant to see. The North Korean blur, North Korea, select zones. From a satellite orbiting hundreds of miles above the Earth, North Korea often appears as a patchwork of clarity and void, regions of sharp detail interrupted by vast stretches of pixelated ambiguity. Entire swaths of territory are deliberately low resolution or blurred, giving the impression of a land half present, half erased. Urban centres shimmer faintly, their roads and rooftops visible in fragments, while other zones, military compounds, research facilities and border regions, seem to dissolve into digital fog. For observers scanning these images, the effect is disorienting, a country both present and absent, resisting comprehension, its geography a riddle encrypted in pixels and secrecy. Each censored area raises questions about what lies beneath, and why the world is not permitted to see. Maps tell a story of control as much as geography, with entire swaths omitted or intentionally distorted, leaving only hints of roads, rivers and settlements. Open-source mapping platforms have repeatedly obscured northern border areas, known nuclear sites and military training grounds, replacing them with blurred patches or artificially reduced resolution. Even where streets and buildings are drawn, their details are often vague or inaccurate, offering only partial insight into the lives of the people who occupy them. The contrast between visible and invisible regions emphasizes the state's control over both information and perception, presenting a landscape shaped as much by ideology as by mountains, rivers, and plains. Even cities that are otherwise visible seem to dissolve at their edges, as if digital hands have erased certain buildings, missile facilities, or industrial complexes from view. Pyongyang, for example, appears orderly in some satellite captures, yet key zones remain obscured or indistinct, their precise layout unknown. In other regions, towns vanish entirely, with streets ending abruptly or neighbourhoods replaced by pixelated grey. Attempts to locate sensitive installations, nuclear reactors, underground bunkers or weapons testing grounds rely on interpretation of shadows, the patterns of power grids, and the sporadic movement of vehicles. The visual gaps invite speculation, but any certainty is impossible, leaving observers to navigate a map that is part reality, part deception. Intelligence analysts rely on fleeting leaks, defector accounts, and seismic or satellite data to reconstruct what cannot be seen, piecing together fragments of a hidden reality. North Korea's Yongbyon nuclear facility, for instance, is monitored through careful observation of infrastructure, cooling towers, and satellite-detected thermal emissions. Reports from defectors have sometimes confirmed or clarified these details, but gaps in data remain substantial, particularly concerning underground facilities or test tunnels. Researchers track the rhythm of activity, vehicles moving along hidden roads, occasional emissions or construction work, to infer the scale and purpose of these obscured zones. Each new piece of information reveals only a fraction of the whole, reinforcing the country's aura of inaccessibility. The natural landscape offers no clues to the mysteries within. Mountains, rivers, and plains conceal installations that appear ordinary until examined through obscured grids and censored imagery. The Korean peninsula's terrain, with its rugged highlands and wide river valleys, provides natural cover for military bases and underground facilities. Satellite images often show regions where topography seems ordinary at first glance, but contains precise patterns suggesting subterranean structures. Roads curve around hills or dead end without explanation, and cleared areas appear sporadically between forests, suggesting activities hidden from public view. Even analysts on the ground cannot fully access these areas, making the land itself an ally in maintaining secrecy. Despite the apparent emptiness in the images, life continues within these blurred zones, a rhythm of daily routines, transport, and work hidden from outside observation. Factory complexes operate under strict security, with limited or no public access, while agricultural zones feed populations in nearby towns. Roads in censored regions carry vehicles, yet their full destinations and cargoes remain obscured. Even seemingly barren expanses host training grounds, missile tests, or small military outposts invisible to digital surveillance. The people who inhabit these spaces navigate a carefully structured environment where the visible is regulated and the invisible is guarded as fiercely as the country's most sensitive weaponry. Each pixelated void on a map represents both intentional concealment and a challenge to understanding, a digital veil protecting secrets from the world beyond. International monitoring groups attempt to fill these gaps through cross-referencing satellite data, intercepted communications, and defector reports, yet uncertainties persist. Some areas remain persistently blurred or censored, suggesting a deliberate strategy to keep not only installations hidden, but also the very perception of the landscape under control. Attempts to photograph or map these zones are limited, making them appear to vanish in plain sight, a ghostly presence on a map that purports to be complete. The contrast between what is known and what is hidden shapes both reality and imagination, leaving the observer suspended between perception and speculation. Analysts can determine that nuclear facilities exist, that underground bunkers are present, and that military training occurs, yet every detail beyond this remains elusive. The very act of attempting to map North Korea's sensitive zones reinforces the country's secrecy. The more people look, the more they realize how little can be seen. As a result, the blurred areas themselves become a character, an entity with presence and intention, shaping understanding without revealing substance. These voids are both empty and full, simultaneously inviting scrutiny and repelling certainty. Even the most persistent attempts at understanding cannot bridge the distance between what is visible and what is intentionally erased. Researchers, journalists, and governments rely on indirect signals such as movement patterns, power consumption, and international treaties to infer activity. Yet, the precise nature of the blurred zones, whether they contain weapons storage, command centers, or experimental facilities, remains unconfirmed. Satellite images may sharpen temporarily, only to be blurred again in later releases, emphasizing the fluidity and deliberate manipulation of perception. The result is a country that is simultaneously present, active, and profoundly unknowable. Maps, photographs, and even first-hand reports are thus only partial reflections of North Korea's reality, with each censored zone a barrier to certainty. These blank spaces on otherwise detailed charts act like mirrors reflecting the limits of observation, reminding the outside world that knowledge is always mediated, filtered, and often denied. What appears empty may conceal immense activity. What seems ordinary may be critical to national security. In this landscape of deliberate uncertainty, the blur itself becomes a symbol of control, of a state that governs not only its people but also the very act of seeing, The blurred regions of North Korea remain as enigmatic as the decisions that obscure them, a puzzle that can never be fully solved. The US maximum security prison roof, Elmira Correctional Facility. Barbed wire coils glint in the morning light, marking the boundary between the known and the forbidden, a threshold no visitor may cross without permission. Concrete walls rise in uniform rows, punctuated by small observation windows and reinforced gates, each bearing warnings and symbols of restricted entry. The air around the perimeter is heavy with the hum of surveillance, a quiet insistence that some spaces are meant to remain untouchable. Even casual observers feel the weight of authority pressing down, an invisible hand reminding them that proximity does not equal access, and that the ground beyond this barrier is reserved for those entrusted with oversight. Faint rumblings of engines echo against the concrete walls, hinting at activity within a space designed to be seen only on a strict schedule and under careful supervision. Delivery trucks arrive in orderly intervals, their movements dictated by protocols as meticulous as the bars and fences themselves. Maintenance crews traverse corridors unseen by the public, servicing systems essential to safety, security, and communication. To the outside observer, these sounds are vague markers of life, a distant signal that the facility is functioning, yet the specifics of what unfolds beyond the walls remain obscured, concealed by design and law alike. Gatehouses and checkpoints interrupt every path, their windows reflecting the gaze of those who monitor movement from within, silent yet unyielding. Guards follow precise routines, eyes scanning every angle, cameras capturing activity on multiple planes. Motion sensors and alarms patrol the invisible zones between towers, corridors, and rooftops. Any deviation from expected patterns is noted immediately, though outsiders are unaware of the protocols that govern each square foot. The very structure of observation ensures that what is seen from outside is only a fragment of the whole, a curated glimpse that leaves the bulk of the facility enshrouded in secrecy. Even maps and online images offer only fragments, with certain portions deliberately obscured, a patchwork of clarity and concealment that refuses full understanding. Satellite platforms often reduce resolution over sections of the compound, blurring rooftops, stairwells, and rooftop access points. Open-source images provide outlines of structures but rarely reveal the details of equipment, barriers, or roof walks. In some cases, censored areas correspond to maximum security wings, indicating a strategic balance between transparency and secrecy. Every pixel withheld reinforces the sense that some truths, even those on a man-made roof, are not meant to be known. Concrete stairwells and hidden walkways suggest routes that the public will never tread, pathways leading to areas sealed off by both law and design. Ventilation systems punctuate the roofline, their shafts rising like silent sentinels. Antennae and communication devices protrude at calculated intervals, each serving a function only authorized personnel can access. Railings and parapets define areas intended for observation, yet barriers prevent full exploration. The roof is a space defined as much by prohibition as by architecture, a surface simultaneously visible and unreachable, a physical reminder that some structures are protected by both walls and intent. Patterns of daily maintenance, guard rotations, and controlled deliveries are visible only in glimpses, each hinting at the rhythm of a world hidden from outside eyes. A worker emerges from a stairwell, pauses to adjust a piece of equipment, and disappears again. A security vehicle glides across the compound, tracing a precise route before vanishing behind a wall. These fleeting impressions offer clues without revealing substance. Even prolonged observation cannot decode the full sequence of activities, and attempts to do so are thwarted by timing, access restrictions, and the careful choreography of personnel who ensure that every motion is accounted for, but mostly invisible to those beyond the gates. Above the compound, the roof conceals a lattice of communication lines and monitoring equipment, silent witnesses to every movement below, yet themselves almost imperceptible to any casual observer. Antenna, motion detectors, and rooftop surveillance cameras are positioned with precise spacing, creating a network that transmits information in real time to command centers hidden deep within the facility. These systems are designed to integrate with alarm protocols, environmental sensors, and security logs, ensuring that no breach or anomaly goes unnoticed. Even minor adjustments such as replacing a camera lens or recalibrating a sensor follow strict procedures and schedules, reinforcing the idea that the rooftop is an operational hub as much as a barrier. where technology and control converge in a space never meant to be examined from outside the walls. The facility's architecture itself communicates a message of authority and exclusion, a silent statement that some places are meant to remain beyond observation. Rooftops are segmented into functional zones, each separated by barriers, equipment, or restricted pathways. Guard towers overlook open courtyards and walkways, their shadows casting a subtle warning across the ground. Even in moments of apparent stillness, the design reinforces the dominance of control, the inaccessibility of knowledge, and the careful management of what is seen and unseen. The roof functions as both a literal and symbolic barrier, representing oversight, surveillance, and the deliberate concealment of critical space. Attempts to map or analyse the facility are constrained by both law and design, leaving researchers to speculate about the true nature of what lies above and below the hardened surface. Publicly available schematics are sparse, and photographs often omit key angles or details. Observers may track shadows, structural lines, or minor movements, yet conclusions remain provisional. Every measure of analysis highlights the limits imposed by authority and architecture. What can be guessed may or may not reflect reality, and certainty is never granted. The roof, while tangible in form, remains largely unknowable, a threshold that exists physically but defies complete comprehension. Even in silence and stillness, the structure conveys authority, containment, and the persistent reminder that some places are meant to remain beyond full comprehension. From the ground or from a distance, it seems ordinary, flat, grey, functional, but every detail from the reinforced stairwells to partially blurred rooftops signals its exclusivity. The restricted areas above are as inaccessible as they are visible, creating an uneasy tension between what can be seen and what must remain hidden. The Elmira roof becomes a quiet witness to the human and institutional order beneath it, a space that balances visibility with deliberate mystery. The roof of Elmira Correctional Facility stands as both a literal and symbolic pinnacle of secrecy, a surface that is present yet fundamentally inaccessible, observed yet off-limits, known only in fragments and shadows. The deserted oil field in Nunavut Baker Lake blocked zone. A white expanse stretches endlessly, broken only by the occasional ridge or frozen creek, where the tundra seems to hold its breath against the Arctic wind. The landscape is deceptively simple, flat plains of ice and snow that extend to the horizon. But within this seeming emptiness lies a hidden anomaly, a space erased or obscured on most maps. Rectangular outlines appear in satellite imagery, only partially visible, their purpose and contents left deliberately ambiguous. Even in a world mapped with precision, this sector of Nunavut resists clarity, hinting at the presence of human activity while preserving an aura of isolation and secrecy. Within this frozen solitude lies a space conspicuously absent from many maps, a rectangular patch erased or blurred, as if the land itself has been deliberately withheld from view. Lines of permafrost and ice break the symmetry, yet the block-shaped anomaly remains stubbornly regular, its edges straight against the chaotic contours of the surrounding terrain. Observers examining publicly available images are confronted with pixelation and blank patches, the kind of digital erasure that evokes questions about both what is physically present and what authorities wish to hide. In this region, visibility is controlled as meticulously as the weather itself. Historical records suggest that this part of Nunavut was surveyed for oil extraction decades ago, though the infrastructure here remains largely undocumented in public sources. During the late 20th century, companies explored the Arctic for energy resources, identifying potential drilling sites and access routes. Yet the harsh conditions, combined with logistical complexity and evolving regulations, left many facilities unfinished or abandoned. Sparse documentation indicates that some structures, storage units, pipelines, and service roads may have been constructed in the Baker Lake area, yet their current condition is nearly impossible to verify, leaving a space where history, industry, and secrecy intersect. Access is tightly controlled, not only by remoteness, but also through governmental and environmental restrictions, ensuring that very few will ever set foot on this stark landscape. Permits for Arctic travel are rare, and the treacherous climate makes extended observation dangerous, if not impossible. Seasonal ice shifts, sudden storms, and sub-zero temperatures create natural barriers that reinforce human-imposed restrictions. Even researchers with legitimate reasons to study the region must navigate layers of legal, environmental, and logistical hurdles. In effect, the desertion of the oil field is both literal and symbolic. The site exists, yet it is systematically removed from ordinary perception. Satellite images reveal only partial clarity. Pixelated sections, blurred shapes, and obscured outlines hint at structures beneath the ice or beneath protective barriers. Rectangular platforms and faint linear pathways appear and disappear depending on the satellite angle, cloud cover, or the imaging resolution. Analysts have noted that these obscured zones correspond to historically mapped exploration plots, suggesting that the area's secrecy is intentional, enforced not only by law but also through technological means. Every attempt to decipher the precise arrangement of buildings or machinery meets a wall of deliberate ambiguity, reinforcing the notion that some truths in Nunavut are not meant for casual scrutiny. The Arctic conditions themselves create an added layer of isolation, with permafrost, snowdrifts, and sub-zero temperatures discouraging prolonged visits and complicating any attempt to understand the area fully. Equipment left behind rusts slowly under harsh winds, while the ground shifts imperceptibly beneath layers of ice and frost, erasing tracks and pathways almost as soon as they are made. Seasonal thawing can expose debris or foundations, yet the revealing is temporary. By winter, the landscape has reclaimed itself, masking human intervention as though nature itself participates in the concealment of this forbidden site. Experts and analysts can only speculate, concluding the angles of shadows, the symmetry of structures, and the limited traces visible through gaps in the imagery. Some propose that storage facilities lie buried beneath protective coverings to withstand the Arctic environment. Others suggest that pipelines, vehicles, or even temporary living quarters were placed here for exploration teams, all removed or hidden to reduce public awareness. The evidence is circumstantial, fragmented, and tantalizing, offering a sense of activity without ever confirming the full extent of what exists, a pattern of both presence and deliberate absence that defines the Baker Lake blocked zone. The interplay of natural desolation and deliberate concealment leaves a landscape that is both starkly exposed and curiously protected, a place where mystery and reality coexist uneasily. Satellite anomalies, weathered infrastructure, and environmental extremity converge to create an area that is materially real yet persistently unknowable. In maps, it is an empty rectangle. In reality, it may hold remnants of industrial ambition, environmental management, or other functions never disclosed publicly. Its very blankness provokes inquiry, drawing the eye and curiosity toward a place simultaneously mapped and erased, known and forbidden. Occasional reports hint at the logistics of maintaining or inspecting the site, though details remain scarce. Helicopters and snow vehicles have been observed on the fringes of Nunavut's oil fields, yet whether these visits relate to monitoring abandoned infrastructure, environmental compliance, or covert operations is never clarified. Communication logs, regulatory filings, and environmental assessments exist in scattered archives, but piecing them together requires a specialized knowledge often inaccessible to outsiders. Every detail contributes to the air of uncertainty, suggesting that behind the barren tundra lies a network of activity both purposeful and concealed, whose true scope remains unknown. Even the visible remnants carry the weight of deliberate design, with roadways, platforms, and cleared areas suggesting order imposed upon the Arctic's chaos. The geometry of these spaces contrasts sharply with the jagged patterns of the surrounding ice, creating subtle signs of human intent. Lines, corners, and elevations appear almost unnatural, as if the land itself has been measured and modified to serve purposes hidden from public view. Observers are left with a paradox, a place that appears abandoned and desolate yet carries silent evidence of deliberate construction and careful oversight. Layers of secrecy, environment, and history combine to produce a zone that resists interpretation, yet demands attention. Each glance at a blurred map, each examination of pixelated imagery, reinforces the sense that something significant lies beneath the ice and snow, intentionally obscured. The Baker Lake blocked zone remains at once tangible and ephemeral. Coordinates exist, shapes are visible, and traces can be measured, but the full story, the true purpose of what stands there, is veiled behind natural and human-imposed barriers. In the frozen expanse of Nunavut, a missing rectangle on maps conceals a landscape that refuses to speak, guarding its mysteries with absolute stillness. The military island of Faro, Fugloy and Svinoy. Seen from a distant ferry, the islands appear quiet, yet something about their edges feels deliberately guarded, a tension that settles in the mind before it is understood. Fugloy and Svinoy rise from the North Atlantic like stones placed with intent, their cliffs steep and unyielding, their coves narrow and forbidding. To a casual observer, they seem like any other northern isles, yet the human eye senses subtle signs of control, small structures perched on ridges, fenced areas invisible until approached, and pathways that terminate abruptly at sheer rock. The island's ordinariness is their camouflage. The secret is embedded not in dramatic features, but in their careful ordinariness, a hidden rhythm that ordinary maps cannot convey. Logs from sailors and researchers hint at off-limits zones, places where compasses and binoculars fail to yield clarity, leaving only questions. Occasional maritime charts note shipping restrictions, naval patrols, and exclusion zones, often annotated in cryptic terms or absent altogether from public documentation. During the Cold War, the Faroe Islands were valued for strategic observation, and some of these restricted areas trace their origins to that era. Official statements are scarce, and researchers rely on anecdotal accounts or sporadic government releases, a patchwork of fragments that paints a picture more enigmatic than revealing. Cliffs rise like sentinels, their shadows concealing pathways that few have trodden and none are permitted to explore. Landing is restricted to authorized personnel, and any approach by boat or helicopter is carefully monitored. Even when the weather allows, waves pound the rock faces with relentless force, and sudden gusts can render otherwise navigable shores dangerous. These natural barriers amplify human restrictions, making unauthorized access both perilous and improbable. The island's isolation is thus not only a matter of law, but also a physical reality, reinforcing the secrecy that surrounds the military zones. Signs and small barriers dot the landing points, subtle yet uncompromising, communicating control without the need for force. A simple warning, a fence post, or a cluster of cameras conveys authority more effectively than overt military presence. Residents of the small villages on the islands learn early to recognize these cues, treating the boundaries with a mix of respect and avoidance. Visitors, by contrast, are often perplexed by the abrupt termination of trails or the sudden disappearance of roads that appear on older maps. Authority here is exercised quietly but with absolute effect. Even aerial photography offers little. Structures appear and disappear depending on the angle, obscured deliberately to prevent detailed observation. Satellite images available to the public show fragmented rectangles, blurred areas, and faint hints of buildings or antenna masts. Attempts to clarify these images are frustrated by digital masking, atmospheric interference, and the harsh interplay of sunlight and shadow on jagged cliffs. Analysts can only speculate, aligning fragmentary evidence with historical knowledge and sparse reports from former personnel. The island's secrets are maintained not by invisibility, but by controlled visibility, offering just enough to provoke curiosity while revealing almost nothing. Gale winds, sudden fog, and frigid waters amplify the island's natural isolation, transforming ordinary geography into a practical deterrent against curiosity. Storms sweep the North Atlantic with sudden ferocity, rolling in grey waves that can block any approach. Fog descends like a curtain, masking paths and harbours alike. The island's cliffs and inlets, already difficult to navigate, become almost impassable, leaving the observer with only glimpses or fleeting impressions. Nature, in this sense, collaborates with human restrictions, turning geography itself into an additional layer of secrecy. Under the cover of night, radar and communication installations hum quietly on the ridges, their precise functions undisclosed but unmistakably active, hinting at operations that continue far beyond civilian awareness. Observers from the sea or nearby islands report faint glows of lights or the movement of vehicles along ridgelines, often disappearing as quickly as they appear. Historical records suggest that these islands have long served as early warning posts and strategic listening stations for North Atlantic operations. Despite their small size, Fugloy and Svinoy may host multiple concealed installations, each carefully designed to integrate with the terrain, reducing visibility from both sea and air. These operational elements reinforce the island's role as more than mere geography. They're active nodes in a network of secrecy that few outside the military can truly comprehend. Piecing together glimpses of radio masts, docks and buildings, historians and analysts find every conclusion provisional, caught between fact and conjecture. Occasional declassified documents suggest communication outposts, radar stations or observation platforms, but details remain incomplete and scattered. Even the presence of permanent personnel is uncertain. Some structures may house rotating teams, while others lie dormant. The difficulty in confirming these elements feeds the island's reputation as a paradox, both tangible and elusive, mapped yet intentionally obscured, known yet unknowable. The interplay of human control and natural isolation produces a sense of tension that pervades the island's very atmosphere. Fishermen report seeing small patrol vessels near off-limit areas, while hikers occasionally glimpse walls or equipment through gaps in fog. Yet these observations are fleeting and fragmented, never allowing a comprehensive view. Every layer of secrecy reinforces the impression that the islands exist not for observation but for concealment, that their true purpose is deliberately shielded from the world. Maps, photos and first-hand accounts offer only pieces, leaving the mind to assemble scenarios that can never be fully verified. Between visibility and concealment, Fugloy and Svinoy exist as contradictions, islands that can be charted and approached, yet whose inner workings remain inaccessible. Public imagery hints at construction and presence, while reality imposes formidable obstacles to entry. The paradox is persistent. The islands are seen, yet their secrets are preserved. They are mapped, yet the full extent of their installations, personnel and purpose remains a mystery. Even the harsh North Atlantic, with its ceaseless tides and sudden storms, seems to conspire in this concealment, shaping both perception and access. No matter how closely observed from afar, the islands protect their truths, each shadowed building and veiled coastline hinting at what will never reach the world.